Greetings and welcome to Fanfiction Reader. I'm thrilled to bring fanfiction to life through audio. I put a lot of effort into these readings, so if you're enjoying the journey, please consider giving the video a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. Your support means a lot. Now, let's dive into the story.
Chapter 81 The First Candidate. No one noticed how their young master Clay appeared beside them silently. To give an inappropriate example, it was like a sheepdog not noticing the wolf kiss handed to their throats. As a personal guard, but not vigilant enough, this will cause big problems on the battlefield. Seeing the winner of the competition standing there like a statue after calling him, Clay felt funny in his heart. He understood the opponent's mood, so he said, "What, was it too much physical exertion just now? It doesn't matter, I can wait." Waking up from a dream, Kristen came back to his senses. The young master in front of him had a gentle and relaxing smile on his face, but even so, he still felt a little nervous. "No, Master Clay, I'm afraid of hurting you." He was a little stumbling when speaking, but at least he made his point clear. He had only seen the young master take action once before, but that time on the school field, everyone was cautious and did not dare to use force with the young master. There were so many people, and it was not his turn to have a sword fight with the young master. After this period of systematic swordsmanship practice, Kristen felt that his swordsmanship had made great progress, so he had this worry. Clay felt that he was being looked down upon by others, even though he knew that the other party's remarks were unintentional. The daily social interactions of these side branches were completely different from the main ones, such as him and the old man. It was normal for them not to speak. Shaking his head, Clay raised his wrist, and the refined steel sword at his waist was unsheathed with a clang. The long sword formed a sword flower in his hand, and a silver-white phantom flashed across it. "Name?" Clay asked calmly. After being stunned for a moment, Kristen realized that the young master was asking for his name. He replied with some restraint, "Kristen." Just after he said his name, Clay's voice was like an arrow shot from a meteor, hitting his eardrums. "Kristen, I remember your name. Now as me, Clay Manderly's personal guard, I order you to pick up your sword." The sword in his hand was halfway raised, but Clay could clearly see Kristen's hesitation, so he added fire. "You don't even have the courage to raise your sword? If that's the case, then you'd better leave here as soon as possible. We don't need weaklings here." As soon as he finished speaking, Clay saw that Kristen's eyes suddenly became firm. He didn't know that Kristen didn't change because of those soft words, but that Clay wanted to drive him home. Reviving his family's glory and becoming a Jazz again held too much weight in his heart. He couldn't accept that he was kicked out of the guards in embarrassment, absolutely not. The sword blade was finally raised. Carson looked directly at his young master who was standing there and at the same time looking at him, and said in a deep voice, "Be careful, young master." The only person who responded to him was Clay, pointing the edge of his sword. Kristen followed Sir Malone's teachings and instinctively took steps to test. In this one-on-one confrontation, the one who strikes first will often find a flaw in the opponent who is waiting for work, thus defeating him in one blow. But soon, Carson discovered that Master Clay in front of him was always oppressing him with his footsteps, not giving him a chance at all. The sword blades made contact and staggered, but he himself was forced back bit by Clay. He couldn't gamble on the young master's patience. If he retreated any further, he would lose the space to counterattack. In desperation, he gritted his teeth and stabbed forward with his long sword. He took the lead. He didn't know the severity of the young master's attack, so he reserved his sword with caution. If the young master didn't react, he could withdraw his force immediately. There was nothing he could do, the difference in status between the two was too big. But the next second, he realized how stupid his idea was, because the sword he stabbed was easily dodged by Clay's head. Then Clay's sword spine was like a snake, and he hit it directly. It reached Kristen's sword-holding wrist. With a muffled groan, Kristen staggered back. The severe pain in his wrist made him completely put away his contempt. If the young master had used a sword just now, his entire right hand and the weapon would have already fallen on the floor tiles under his feet. Clay nodded to him and signaled to continue. The sword in his hand revealed another beautiful sword flower, with the blade pointing upward and attached to the back of his arm. The blow just now was just to remind his opponent to be serious. Taking a deep breath, Kristen understood that the young master's swordsmanship was probably not weaker than his own. There were many people in the north who were martial and straightforward. Only by going all out could they win the respect of others. After testing again, Carson swung his sword with all his might and slashed at Clay's left armpit. This was a very difficult sword to defend because the left side was a backhand, and faced with a full swing, the blocker, it will be very strenuous. But in the flash of lightning, he saw that Master Clay's sword was like an indestructible pillar, and after an explosion, he steadily received his blow. Before he could react, Clay's left hand, which had always been free, followed his body forward and directly grabbed his sword-holding wrist. Kerrison only felt a strong force coming from him. The wrist that had just been slapped by the back of Clay's sword was attacked again. The unstoppable pain went straight to his brain along the nerves. The command to grit his teeth and not give up the sword had just come from his brain, but his body's instinct had already made his weapon clang to the ground. With Clay's strong tug, Kerrison's throat was pulled in front of the sword's edge. The outcome is decided. Clay's sharp hearing collected the sounds of the surrounding guards gasping for air. It was too fast. From the moment the fight started to when Kerrison was taken away from his weapon and defeated, there were 2 moves in a row, and they were still attacking the same position. They all know that Kerrison's swordsmanship, although he occasionally loses to others, is always one of the best, and they all know it after getting along for a while. But even so, Kristen was played like a child in Master Clay's hands. Everyone could see that it was not Kristen who kept his hand, but Master Clay. Okay, Kristen, now I am the winner. You are welcome to challenge me again and take back your winner. Clay smiled, pulled the complicated-looking Kristen up, put his sword into its sheath, and said to him with a smile, "Master, your bravery is the strongest among people I have ever seen." Still unable to speak, Kristen would only give clumsy, dry compliments like this. Clay smiled, patted Kristen on the shoulder and said to him, "This is White Harbor. The whole of Westeros is so big. From now on, I will take you to see the martial arts of the southern swordsman." Of course, there is a high probability that it will be on the battlefield, he added in his mind. He has already decided that Kerrison in front of him is his first choice. "Kristen, I want to give you a task. I wonder if you can complete it?" Clay put away his smile, his face full of seriousness. Without any hesitation, Kristen straightened his body like a javelin stuck in the ground, and shouted loudly, "Your sword edge my direction." The candidate was determined, and Clay handed him over to his old man. The old man would take him to a basement that was guaranteed to be secretive, where Kerrison would be tested. And Clay has now left the new castle. He didn't bring anyone with him, because he was going to the Godswood outside the Wolf's Lair to ask our beloved Lord Three-Eyed Crow for some magic power. After becoming a Witcher, magic power will slowly recover on its own, but now, Clay plays the role of a mage who maintains physical stability in preparation for Krissen's mutation. And in order to avoid those terrible side effects, he had to come here. Chapter 82 Full of magic power, everything is ready. The sacred forest is as quiet as ever. The thick tree trunks support a large sea of leaves of various styles, floating in the space more than 3 meters above the ground. This place is close to the ancient wolf den that no one in White Harbor wants to come to. Clay's arrival may be the first visitor to this ancient forest today. The last time, before he left for the twins, he shared the bottle of low-quality ale full of memories with Sir Bartimus, the commander of the White Sea Guards. Now, Sir Bartimus has stayed away from this forest and returned to his fiefdom, but Clay has returned here to communicate with the power of the old gods believed in the north again. With his excellent senses, Clay quickly passed through the periphery of the Godswood and saw the ancient heart tree in the center. At the foot of the tree was still the pool, just as he remembered. After bypassing the pool, Clay came to the foot of the heart tree. The purple-red leaves swayed above his head, making a rustling sound as the leaves rubbed against each other. Coupled with this quiet and beautiful environment, it would have been a fascinating world, but Clay knew very well that the ancient heart tree in front of him, full of traces of time, was an eye of the three-eyed crow planted here. When the three-eyed crow left last time, it left enough magic here. Clay didn't have time to extract it at the time, and then he went south non-stop. Now, it's finally time to take away this gift. The palm of his hand gently pressed against the cold bark of the heart tree. Clay's demon hunter system expanded on his retinas as he thought. He called up his own magic pool and began to extract magic power from the heart tree for the second time. Unlike last time, Clay himself was almost exploded by the surging magic power. Now he can effectively control the infusion of magic power. Although the magic pool itself does not show an upper limit, Clay's own body has a limit. The three-eyed crow, that is, the magic power of the old god, is itself complex. In Clay's opinion, it seems to be a fusion of many powers. He cannot use these powers directly and must be cleaned from the system's magic pool before he can use them. If this kind of magic was used directly, Clay had a hunch that if he drank the grass decoction under such circumstances, even if 10 of him were there to help, it would not be enough for Kristen to die alone. According to the theory of the three-eyed crow, this is that under different magic systems, different magic powers are, to magical creatures, poisons that cannot be cured in this world. Clay estimated that if he didn't have the Witcher system as a filter, he probably wouldn't be able to use the power of the old gods at all. Magic power is slowly poured in, and the number of the magic power pool in the system is also constantly beating. Originally, there was only 80 points of magic power in stock, but Clay is preparing to reserve more than 200 points this time. Because the success rate itself increased by 10%, he spent less magic power to increase the success rate and ensure Kristen's life. In addition to immunity from fertility problems and a series of side effects such as cat eyes, more than 200 magic points are enough for him to create 2 demon hunters. Anyway, at this stage, he can use the magic power of the three-eyed crow however he wants. There is no need to use too much magic power at once. He still remembers the painful feeling of the magic power filling his body the last time he was in the Godswood of Winterfell. Magic power surged and Clay continued to extract magic power. He knew that the three-eyed crow could feel his current movements. To a certain extent, his current behavior was equivalent to plucking his feathers. Can he not feel it? Outside the Great Wall, there is a hidden cave. The three-eyed crow, entangled by countless vines like a dead tree, opened his blood-red single eye, twisted his stiff head, and looks towards the south. Why, when my power enters your body, I can no longer feel it. The more secrets you have, the more frightened I am. Even my lord doesn't know who is behind you. It really worries me, strange god's agent. Silent whispers shuttled through the dark space, carrying deep doubts and fears. The three-eyed crow has observed the heresy in this northern land countless times, but to this day, he still has not gained anything. What kind of power is it? He urgently wants to know. Half an hour passed before Clay finally stopped his movements and withdrew his hand from the rough-textured tree trunk. He has accumulated 220 points of magic power, which is enough for him to use next. Okay, let's call it a day. It's time for me to go back. If I don't show up at White Harbor for a long time, I don't know how many people will be anxious. Tesk, it's really true. It hasn't been this important in the past 10 years. After mocking himself, Clay turned around and walked back. His Witcher senses allowed him to clearly identify the footprints. It has to be said that the Witcher senses are also very useful against road warriors. Others rely on directions when walking, and there is no one else who relies on footprints to get home. Returning the way he came, he walked out of the Godswood. The horses he left outside were still grazing leisurely there. It's not just how honest the folk customs of White Harbor are, but the mermaid family emblem painted on the saddle and poncho, which makes it immune to the covetousness of others. He got on the horse's back and touched the mane on the horse's neck. Clay kicked his feet lightly, and the war horse that had been trained for a long time immediately took 4 hooves and ran towards the new castle under Clay's control. Stand up. For Carrison, he never expected that with just one word from Master Clay, he would be taken to the Poseidon Tower, the core building of the Manderly family, and directly meet the leader of the Manderly clan, Earl Wyman. After understanding Kristen's purpose, the old man immediately realized that the young man in front of him was the first person chosen by his grandson. Although he didn't know why he was the only one, Count Wyman completely believed in his grandson. Take him underground. There is a room painted with red paint next to the weapons depot. You know the place, Earl Wyman said to the guard. Seeing the guard nodding, he looked at Kristen, with a smile on his red face. Boy, follow my guards and wait somewhere. Kid Klein should be back to find you soon. Kristen nodded blankly. He actually didn't know the purpose of being brought here. Count Wyman knew the doubts in his heart very well. But it would be better for Clay to talk about this specifically. After all, he is his personal guard, and he cannot help him with everything. For Clay, this is indeed the case. What these guards will face in the future is far more than any noble guard. It would be extremely inappropriate not to bear his mark. After riding his war horse all the way up, Clay returned to the courtyard and handed the horse over to his attendant. Now, he was going to the Witcher mutation room that the old man had prepared for him. Now he is full of magic power and has the decoction in hand. It can be said that everything is ready, except for a mutation. Chapter 83 The trial begins. Kerrison was sent to the underground of Poseidon Tower by Count Wyman's guards, into a room with a red mark on the door. He had asked the guard what the room was for, but it was obvious that the guard didn't know much more than he did. There were many candles lit in the room, which looked like they had been recently put away. There were not many traces of solidified candle tears underneath the candles. The furnishings in the room are very simple, a table with nothing on it, only a candlestick. There is a bed in the center, it should be regarded as a bed. This thing was made of thick steel bars, with a gap in the middle that could accommodate a person. Moreover, he noticed that there were unclosed metal buckles on his hands, feet, and neck. He didn't know what they were for. Oh. There were several chairs around, and he even saw enough water and food for one person to last for a long time near a cabinet near the door. Other than that, there is nothing here except the dark brick walls and countless flickering candles in sight. The guard told him to wait for Master Clay here, and then went out by himself. He heard the sound of the door being locked, pushed it, and sure enough, he was locked in here. People who are locked up in a claustrophobic place will more or less feel fear, and Kerrison is no exception. His thoughts are flying in his mind, thinking about why he is locked up here. Was it because the young master was dissatisfied during the afternoon competition? Shaking his head, he didn't think so. From beginning to end, his sword didn't even touch the young master's clothes, so how could he offend the young master? Why? Kerrison thought over and over again, but had no answer. Although there were many vents here, Kerrison still felt a not too strong sense of suffocation. Of course, Clay didn't know this. He just asked the blacksmith of the Manderly family to build a bed for mutation, and then asked the old man to send people to pile some food and water into the room. When he himself mutated, it only took him one night to complete it, but this did not mean that others were like this. A normal Witcher mutation takes a considerable amount of time. Although Clay himself has a system to speed up the process, it does not mean that it is the same when he mutates others. When he arrived in the courtyard, Clay happened to meet the guards coming out of the underground and learned that Kerrison had been taken to the basement. Just in time, it saves him the trouble of running to the Shanghai Tower to ask where his old man is. Although the Poseidon Tower itself is heavily guarded, for Clay, this is his home, and this highly recognizable face is the best passport. Going down the stone staircase, the entire underground of Poseidon Tower seemed dim because there was no light and could only be illuminated by torches or candles inserted into the wall. After going down to the ground floor, Clay didn't waste much effort and found the room with a red mark on the door. When he pushed the door open, it was locked. He was slightly stunned, and then suddenly realized that this should be what the old man asked the guards to do. He had the key. The old man had given it to him a long time ago. The fist-sized lock ensured safety. Clay inserted the key into the keyhole. With a little force, the lock, which seemed to him to be extremely simple, had been opened. When he opened the door and took a look, he saw Kerrison, who was restless in the room, like an ant on a pot. The first time he saw him, Kerrison couldn't hide his surprised expression at all. No matter who has been locked up for a long time, he will always be very excited when someone opens the door suddenly. "Master Clay," Kerrison called. When he saw that it was his own young master who opened the door, he immediately believed what the guard told him, but he didn't know what needed to be done in such a private place. "It seems like this place doesn't make you feel good." Clay smiled. With the flickering candlelight, he could clearly see the sweat on Kerrison's forehead. "It's not hot here, so it can only be. It was caused by his anxiety." Waving his hand and pointing to the chair, Clay motioned for the other person to sit down and relax. "If I remember correctly, your name is Kristen Mandler." Clay also found a seat and sat down and started chatting with Kerrison, who still seemed a little nervous. After all, he didn't have time to build trust with these guards bit by bit. Time is also a cost, and sometimes it's even incredibly valuable. Clay asked Kerrison a lot about the situation at home, why he wanted to be his personal guard, and asked him to share his feelings or thoughts about training during this period of time. Trust between people is increased through mutual communication. It is impossible to completely trust someone with whom you have never talked, no matter how high the status of the person is. Clay opened a bottle of wine for him. He didn't mention the name of the wine. It was all good wine shipped from the south. After a few sips, Clay realized that the bodyguard in front of him might have never drunk such a high-altitude wine with a complicated brewing process before. Because when he didn't feel anything at all, Kerrison's face was already covered with alcoholism, and he was obviously drunk. I felt a little proud of my drinking capacity and stopped Kerrison from touching the wine glass again. I gave him some wine to relieve the pain he was about to suffer. Unexpectedly, the effect was surprisingly good. No more drinking. Once Kristen falls asleep, any further mutation will be equivalent to killing him. Kristen, do you think you can be my personal guard with your current strength? You can't even take my 3 swords. Should you protect me or should I protect you on the battlefield? Clay suddenly asked a question that left Kristen speechless. With his face flushed, Kristen held it in for a long time, thinking of his performance in the afternoon, and finally said in a low voice as if he was discouraged, "Sir, I disappoint you." Clay smiled and said, "So, want to have strength and speed like me and some powers beyond your imagination?" Looking at Kristen, who suddenly raised his head, Clay smiled even brighter, and he continued, "I think you know that I traveled from Essos for 2 years before returning home. In the past 2 years, I got some interesting things on that land. Do you want to try it?" Looking directly into Karasen's eyes, Clay asked the last question, hitting Karasen's heart hard. "As the first person I selected as my personal guard, I know your wish. If you accept this power, you will become a Jazz again. So, are you willing, Lord Kristen?" The last adult seemed to possess some kind of magic power. Kristen's groggy head finally cleared up. He no longer hesitated and nodded firmly. "My lord, your sword edges my direction." This was the final answer in Clay's most satisfactory statement. He pointed to the iron bed, his voice filled with seriousness and expectation. "Then, Kristen, lie down and I will drink 3 potions for you. This will cause you unforgettable pain, but if you can get through it, believe me, you will never regret it." After fastening the buckles around Kristen's hands, feet and neck, and fixing him tightly to the iron frame bed, Clay took out the 3 small bottles of grass decoction. Looking at Kristen, who raised his head slightly, he was heartbroken and fed him the green grass decoction in order. The next moment, the veins on Kristen's neck popped out and his teeth clenched instantly. Clay knew that the pain had begun to spread from his body to his whole body. He pressed his hands on Kristen's body, and the magic power in his body rushed into Kristen's body along his hands. "Hold on, when you open your eyes again, you will be born again." The original green grass decoction was, in fact, an intravenous injection, but considering that the technology was too high and well, a bit scary, I changed it to an oral liquid form. I hope you understand. Chapter 84, my compatriots. Clay didn't know if Kristen regretted his decision, but now, the grass decoction was transforming his body from the inside, and all he could do was grit his teeth and live. Magic poured out from the palm that released the seal. With the help of the system, Clay was now a mage. He must use magic to stabilize Kristen's collapsing body, otherwise, he will not survive. An adult struggled on the iron frame bed, pulling the iron ring with his hands and feet, making a clanging sound. Clay couldn't release an axi seal for him. Although this could calm him down, it would greatly increase the probability of an accident. It was very clear how painful this was. The person in front of him looked like he was crazy, restless, and his body was twisting wildly. However, this was not the most critical situation. Because, until now, except for the clenching sound of his teeth, Clay had never heard any sounds from him. At any rate, he at least had the ability to control his critical jaw muscles so that they wouldn't open and let out an instinctive wail of pain. This is also the reason why Clay chose this basement. If it is on the Poseidon Tower, don't underestimate the propagation distance of human roars in that kind of ring-shaped building. Hold on to Kristen, this is ancient Valyrian technology. If you get through it, you will become a powerful warrior of the ancient Valyrian Empire just like me. Under the guidance of Clay's system, the magic power was transformed into a stable spell, which echoed over and over again on Kristen's body. He didn't know if Kristen could hear his words of encouragement, but it was better than nothing. But the next moment, he gave up this doubt, because he saw an ugly smile suddenly appeared on Kristen's ferocious and twisted face, and he heard, "I can still, hold on, sir." Speaking every word was a huge consumption for Kristen. Accompanied by the sound of breathing like a bellows, Kristen expressed his attitude with great difficulty. After Clay explained the situation, he expected it to be painful. During the previous training, his arm was accidentally cut open by a comrade who was also a personal guard. He thought the pain was the limit. But he didn't expect that as soon as the 3 bottles of medicine given by Lord Clay entered his throat, the pain that almost broke the limit of his endurance began to spread from his stomach and spread throughout his body in just a few breaths. In a daze, he was thinking, how did Mr. Clay persist in such pain? There is no progress bar for this kind of thing. The pain makes all the cells in the body groan and tremble. It is endless, and I don't know when it will end. From Clay's perspective, Kristen was now covered in sweat, almost as if he had been fished out of water, and his clothes clung to his body because they were all wet. He didn't touch Kristen's skin, but his sight and smell told him that it must be sticky and smelly, exactly like his own before. Now Karrison is no longer as manic as before and has become calm, as if asleep, but this does not make Clay feel relaxed, because it does not mean that the pain has passed. This is because the pain has exhausted the struggling Kristen's strength, and this is even more dangerous. Hey, I'm just different from others. The system really saved my life back then. Clay cursed secretly and sighed in his heart. If there was no system to directly output magic power in the body, his life would definitely have been handed over to the godswood in Winterfell. It was really a fluke. Taking out the gauze prepared in the cabinet, Clay wiped away Kristen's nosebleed. Physical damage can happen anywhere. Such rupture of capillaries is nothing more than a small scene. He freed up a hand to feel for his pulse on his hot neck. Fortunately, although it was rapid, it was strong. After all, such a long period of training coupled with the intake of highly nutritious food has provided his body with a certain amount of reserves. If he were an ordinary farmer with a sallow complexion and skinny muscles, he might die of organ failure as soon as he drank the potion. The worse his health, the greater the risk. The magic power is output steadily, and the speed of consumption is within expectations, but I don't know how long this process will last. Clay had a hunch that this would be longer than the one night it took him to complete the mutation. He was not sure how long it would take. As my first experiment to expand the Demon Hunter Legion, you must persevere, Clay whispered to himself. In the small basement, there was only the occasional sound of Clay changing his stance, and the occasional sound of Kristen twitching and pulling on the iron frame. Other than that, there was silence. Clay had already stated that no one was allowed to enter this door unless he came out on his own. This order was valid for everyone in White Harbor except the old man. The rest is a long game between Clay's magic and Karrison's body. It seemed like he had an extremely confusing long dream. When Kristen opened his eyes again, he didn't realize where he was for a moment. In the dream, he saw his past, the boy holding a pair of rusty armor, walking hard in the rainy White Harbor. And he seemed to see his future again. It was a night, but everything at night was extremely clear to him. Wearing armor, he sneaked towards the warehouse full of grain. Near the granary, he inserted full of flags. Don't ask why he was sure it was a granary, he just knew it. He seemed to have special powers. Kristen saw himself suddenly making a gesture he didn't recognize when he was discovered by the guards. The green rune flashed past, and the guard continued to move forward as if he hadn't seen him. Later, when the granary was on fire, he was like a ghost in the dark night, coming and going invisible, and no one knew of his existence. When the dream ended, he suddenly realized what was drawn on that flag. That's a golden roaring lion. The next second, the dream shattered and he heard a tired voice. You're awake. Not a question, but a statement. His eyes blinked up and down in confusion. After half a minute, he finally remembered where he was and who was talking to him. He jumped up from the loosened iron frame bed and saw Master Clay in the sight of countless candlelights, who was resting in a chair and chewing bread to regain his strength. Karrison rolled off the iron frame bed, but as soon as he landed, he fell to the ground. Seeing this scene, Clay laughed and said, Be careful. You still need to adapt to your mutated body. Mutation. Karrison suddenly remembered why he was lying on the iron frame bed. He looked at his body carefully and instantly felt the unusual power in his body. He raised his head in astonishment and looked at the master who gave him this power in disbelief, speechless. At this time, he heard Clay's voice. Congratulations, now you are my compatriot. Chapter 85 System Upgrade Again. It was on the evening of the second day after Clay began to mutate that he removed the magic output that stabilized his body. This dangerous mutation lasted for more than a day, twice as painful as his own mutation. After experiencing a series of behaviors such as bleeding, vomiting, shouting, and acting crazy, Karrison finally calmed down completely, and Clay, whose magic penetrated his body, finally waited for the end. After such a long period of magic output, although the magic power consumption itself is still within the tolerable range, the mental and physical losses are indeed real. After the stabilizing spell was finally removed, Clay almost collapsed on the ground. It took him a long time to move himself back into the chair, breathing heavily. It's so tiring for his mother. That's all Clay feels like right now. After waiting for a long time, the old man finally became a little anxious. He came to the door and asked about the situation inside through the door panel. After getting an answer from Crane, he left hesitantly. He knew that he couldn't help. In his opinion, that kind of amazing magical power was stealing the power of the gods. How could it be easy for an ordinary person to obtain the power of the gods? While waiting for Kristen to recover and wake up, Clay received an unexpected surprise. His Witcher system, followed by his own creation of the second Witcher in Westeros, has been upgraded again. With a thought, the Demon Hunter system unfolded on the retina. Witcher system level 3. Potions pull down to expand. Balm pull down to expand. Equipment pull down to expand. Magic pool, 110. Unlocked sigils, Quen level 1, Arden level 1, Alder level 1, Igni level 1, Yaxi level 1. Items pull down to expand. Swire, Kristen Mandler number of mutations, 1. Roughly speaking, the most conspicuous change is the extra attendant column. Clay opened Kristen Mandler's message and was shocked when he saw it. In front of him, the system actually showed him various body data of Kristen Mandler, including various sizes. But that's not the most important thing. After he selected the name of the attendant, he could feel the person's position secretly, and it was not a visual signal. Moreover, he can get the general thoughts of this person. If there are any thoughts that are not conducive to him in the future, he can catch them immediately. Finally, through the system, Clay can transform his thoughts into the subconscious mind of the chosen servant, directly becoming natural thoughts. To sum up, Clay thought of this set of things, something called a psychic interferometer in a famous real-time strategy game. Although the principles are different, the effects are similar. If he changed it to something more suitable for the occasion, he felt like he was the ancestor of the blood race, and these demon hunters he created were like his blood descendants. The emergence of this attendant option, and the supporting backgrounds of these Manderly family branches, directly solved the betrayal problem almost 100%. When he was planning to create a legion of demon hunters, he was worried about being betrayed by the demon hunters he created. After all, in this world of ice and fire, you would be embarrassed to call yourself a noble without experiencing betrayal. But now, before the number of his demon hunter army is too large for him to check and ignore some people, he can solve this problem almost directly. This thing is a Cray one-way transmission system, and these attendants are all receivers. If it is really used, there will probably be more surprises. In addition, the system has opened up improved functions for potions, especially grass decoctions, but Clay has not yet studied them in detail. In the world of Witchers, the mutation potion formulas of each school are different, and the Witchers they create perform differently in various aspects. The Cat School is good at speed and assassination, but is poor at seals. The Griffin School is proficient in seals, but is weaker than other demon hunters in other aspects. This is a question that can be extended a lot, because demon hunters with different abilities are suitable for different battlefields. Clay will definitely try it if he has the opportunity in the future. The remaining potions, such as Blizzard, all have advanced improvement options, but now with so many things, he has no time to think about making those potions. When Karrison finally woke up, Clay ignored all the dirt on him and welcomed his new life with a smile. Pulling him up from the ground, Clay asked, "How is it? Compared to before, do you feel any obvious sensation in your body?" Kristen, whose face was full of strangeness, sat in a chair. Hearing this, he carefully considered the changes in his body. After organizing his words for a long time, he said, "Sir, I feel that there is an extra power in my body, but I can't find a way to use it." Clay knew that he was describing the magic power that had just appeared in the body. Clay, who knew the magic seal, would use the magic seal, but Kristen didn't know. Normally, a true Valyrian warrior has a lot to learn besides enduring the test just now, such as. With a strike of Clay's fingers, an extinguished candle on the table instantly ignited. Kristen stared at this scene intently. He was very sure that the young master did not have any matches in his hand. This is a manifestation of the power within you. Come on, stretch out your left hand and make this gesture. Clay made the gesture of the Igni sign. His index finger was bent and pressed against the raised middle finger, and the remaining 3 fingers were stretched forward and separated. Karrison studied for a long time and finally made this gesture. Clay slightly corrected it and then explained. Now, communicate with the power within you, focus your attention, and release it. Karrison tried for a long time. In Clay's eyes, the magic power gathered in his left hand, but he could not find a way to release it. Finally, a small spark came out of Karison's left hand. Kristen was startled as he subconsciously withdrew his hand. Unlike Clay, he was fully mentally prepared for the seal. Very good, come again, continue to focus as you did just now. Clay continued to encourage that only by constantly failing can one master a Dharma seal. How can it be so easy to obtain power? Gritting his teeth, Kristen made the gesture of the Igni seal again, focusing his attention on the palm of his hand again. I don't know how many times I sprayed sparks, but finally, the spurting flame swept across the ground. Since there was no flammable material, only sparks and flickering embers of flames were left on the ground. Staring at his hands in disbelief, Kristen backed away in shock and stood up from the chair. He took a step back and was held up by Clay's outstretched hand. Sir, what is this? Kristen's voice was trembling. This power, which was completely beyond his understanding, actually came from his hands. Fear and excitement, complex feelings filled her heart. Clay smiled and answered Karison's question softly. Seal Igni. Typos will be posted first and corrected later. Please subscribe and support. Regarding the issue of loyalty, I actually didn't intend to contact the system. This is actually a lazy way of writing it, but I think it would be quite unpleasant if the demon hunter created by the protagonist betrays the protagonist in the future. That's about it. Calculating the time, Ned's overturn in King's Landing is actually not far away. Don't worry, what you want to see will arrive soon. As for the pacing issue, indeed, unlike other fan novels that have the main plot as soon as they come in, this book of mine has done a lot of interpretation in the front. After all, Game of Thrones fans have all chosen the right characters with similar names, and a brand new one characters, when arriving in Westeros, must find their place. If the protagonist comes up, creates a witcher with just a touch of his finger, leads thousands of witchers to the battlefield within a few chapters, and then sweeps the 7 kingdoms, becomes himself crossed out, and sits on the Iron Throne, then how long can the story be? If you don't talk nonsense, it will be over in 200,000 words. I use my own thinking to reconstruct a story, which is bound to be inferior to the clever readers. There are some places where I am not thoughtful, but please forgive me. Chapter 86 Experiments and Ideas. Igni. As he muttered this strange pronunciation, the shock in Karison's heart was hard to describe in words. Without the help of anything, a person's palm could actually spit out fire. Clay read the look on his face and understood his feelings very well. This was a power that did not belong to this world. If it could not surprise people, it would be a shame for his own efforts. Do you remember the release gesture of this seal? Clay patted Karison on the shoulder to wake him up from his soliloquy. The latter suddenly became excited and answered quickly. Remember it, I will definitely remember it, sir. That's good. There are 5 kinds of seals in total, but I won't demonstrate them to you one by one here. Looking at Kristen's confused eyes, Clay smiled tiredly, pointed at Kristen, and said helplessly, Don't you think you stink too much? Vomit, smelly sweat. If you hadn't been able to release the seal, I would have doubted that my mutation was successful. The Witcher's mutation also gave the mutant an excellent sense of smell. If the huge shock of the Igni seal hadn't made Kristen lose his mind, he would have been fainted by the smell of his own body. Visible to the naked eye, Kristen's throat was rolling as his sense of smell came back online. He was obviously suppressing the feeling of vomiting rushing into his throat. Clay waved his hand, indicating that he would wait here. When leaving the house, Clay said, Be clear-headed. Apart from you, me, and the Count, no other person can know about the power you have gained. After more than a day, Clay once again opened the wooden door engraved with red marks. The only person guarding the door was the old man's closest guard. Hearing the noise and seeing Clay coming out when the door opened, the guard immediately stepped forward and asked with concern, Master, have you finished handling your matter? Nodding, Clay pointed to the inside of the door and directly ordered, Go, find 2 people and clean it up. There is one of my personal guards inside. Let him clean up inside and then come out. He didn't bother to pay attention to the weird look in the guard's eyes. What was going on in his mind? Okay, sir. Seeing Clay turn around and leave after giving instructions, the guard could only stroke his chest and salute, and then went to find someone to work with a strange look on his face. Poseidon Tower, study room. Clay, who returned to his room, cleaned himself up and took a short rest, was now sitting neatly in his old man's study, skillfully opened a bottle of wine for himself, and leaned on the table in front of the old man, in the soft chair. Regarding his grandson's hidden behavior, Earl Wyman just blew his beard and pretended not to have seen it. Clay slowly drank a large sip of summer red for himself and let out a satisfied sigh. Compared to the golden wine of Kingting Island, he preferred this wine to his taste. Drink less. You can still drink now than when your father was younger. 3 generations of my Manderly family have been alcoholics. I really don't know who to blame. The old man complained about his grandson's behavior, but he kept pouring himself a large glass, and then put down the almost empty wine bottle. Clay shrugged indifferently. Clay would hear such words whenever he drank with the old man. He was already used to it. Tell me, how's that kid, Kristen? Did you succeed? Compared with wine, the old man is still most concerned about this issue. Clay nodded, with a look of relaxation on his face after exhaustion, and he replied calmly. Grandpa, don't worry, we have succeeded. This process is so excruciating that I almost can't hold on. Seeing the questioning look from the old man, Clay felt that it was necessary to talk to me a little, so he thought about it and continued. It goes without saying that you can guess from the several materials we have collected that if you mix them together and drink them directly, you will die. If you want to succeed, you must have sufficient auxiliary means, such as magic. The old man thought of his grandson's methods that were still fresh in his memory, and couldn't help but nodded. Clay continued. The function of this special medicine is to completely change a person from the inside of the body. This process is very dangerous and must be assisted by someone. It took me a day to stabilize his body, and the rest fell into place. After listening to his grandson's words, the old man was silent for a long time and suddenly asked, Then this Kristen, after experiencing this mutation, can he be like you? He must find out how capable the warriors created by Sun Tzu are. This is what he must know as the ruler of White Harbor. No, he is still far away. The completion of the mutation only gives him the possibility to use those abilities. As for someone like me, he must practice for a long time and learn a lot of things. For example, I only taught him the Igni seal that can light fire, but if I don't teach him the rest, no one in this world will be able to give him these abilities. Earl Wyman believed deeply in what his grandson said. This was probably the logic of teaching his apprentices to starve their masters to death. In fact, demon hunters have many abilities and a huge knowledge base, but Clay will not teach them all. Although he can directly observe the thoughts of every demon hunter through the system, he must be careful in everything. In this world, he is not the only one with magical power. The three-eyed crow, Melisender, Thoros, and even the White Walker Night King beyond the Great Wall. Therefore, he must keep what should be kept in his own hands. If an accident occurs, he must leave himself enough room to maneuver. That's good. I don't understand this, but you can control it yourself. What are your plans next? Clay knew that the old man was asking whether he would continue to create witchers. Regarding this question, Clay had already considered this question in his mind. He shook his head and expressed his thoughts. Don't be in a hurry. If you do too much at once, problems will arise if you can't control them one by one. Moreover, this kind of thing is also a huge drain on me. I can't spend all my energy on it. After all, I am a Manderly first and then a warrior of the so-called ancient Valyria. This sentence obviously spoke to the heart of the old man, with a smile of satisfaction on his red face. His grandson is good at this, he can handle it clearly and will not become a slave of strength. Okay, you decide for yourself. Oh, by the way, it seems that you haven't gone to the wolf's den yet. When you come back this time, I have been in charge of this period. When you come back, go and have a look. After all, you are the White Sea Guard, Commander. The old man raised the trident ring inlaid with blue gems on his hand and said quietly, Blue and red are different after all. Those guys only recognize red. Nodding, Clay knew that it was really time for him to go there and take a look. Chapter 87 Role on the Battlefield. As the core of the entire White Harbor intelligence system, even if the commander of the White Sea Guard is not in White Harbor, it is still playing its role. Pieces of news from the north and south of White Harbor were dismantled from the feed of each raven, and finally compiled into a logically clear dossier. During this period, they have been brought to Earl Wyman. But after Clay came back, the command power returned to him, or rather to the blood-red gem. It only recognized the ring but not the person. It was no joke. After Clay came back, he had been busy with his Witcher expansion plan and really didn't care too much. But after completing the production of the first Witcher, Clay finally had time to deal with the wolf lair. Originally, Clay planned to go alone, but after thinking about it, he called Kristen, who had already taken a bath and had a smell acceptable to normal people again. It's not that Clay is confused and wants to tell him about the wolf's lair, he just wants to talk to him more. The wolf's lair only allows him to recognize the door, and it's still too early for him to come into contact with the things inside. Riding himself on the horse, Clay waited for about 10 minutes. Carrison had already changed his armor and came to him on a brown war horse. After looking the young Witcher bodyguard up and down, Clay smiled. Not bad, looks good. Is your body recovered? Now that he has become a demon hunter, he naturally has basic body metabolism recovery capabilities. From being unable to stand up when he woke up, to now fully displaying the fitness that a demon hunter should have, it only took half a day. Although it is not an exaggerated breathing method to restore blood, the recovery speed is also extremely impressive. Kristen was slightly moved by the young master's question, with a smile on his face, and replied excitedly. Okay, master, I feel very good now. The ability you gave me has allowed my body to recover incredibly quickly. Pressing his hand, Clay stopped Kristen from continuing to express his excitement and whispered. Okay, I understand. You and I are the only ones in Westeros who have this kind of power. Be careful, it's not time to let others know. Because the horses were so close together, only 2 people could hear the words. After being stunned for a moment, Kristen immediately realized that he had been overly excited. He looked around cautiously and breathed a sigh of relief when he found that no one was paying attention. Clay didn't want to continue listening to Kristen share his feelings here, so he raised his whip, pointed in the direction of the wolf's den, and gave his order. Let's go, my personal guard, I'm going to go outside the city now, you follow me. After saying that, he clamped his feet on the horse's belly, and the horse rushed out 2 steps, then started running, and quickly disappeared out of the courtyard with Clay. When Carrison saw that the young master had already set off, he immediately followed him. Clay is now completely familiar with this road from Newcastle to Wolf's Den. After all, he has walked it back and forth many times. He is not a road fool. No matter how stupid he is, he should remember it. Clay took Kristen out of the city. Kristen had never been to the wolf's lair before, and he had never even heard of the wolf's lair. The old man and Sir Bartimus, for the sake of the White Sea Guard's concealment, deliberately weakened the existence of the wolf lair. When Carrison asked Clay why he went to the wolf's den, Clay did not answer him. You still have a lot to learn. My personal guard has such power. You might as well think about what you should do on the battlefield. Clay raised a question, which was what he specifically wanted to tell Kristen to think about today. Sir, Kristen opened his mouth, not knowing what to say. Clay knew that this question was really out of line for a side branch that had not even entered the Poseidon Tower in the past 20 years. But there was nothing he could do. The huge cost of making demon hunters made him realize that it was unrealistic to create an army of demon hunters that could charge head-on within 2 months. Thinking about the trial process, he was really exhausted and couldn't even do it. Therefore, the large army route is not feasible, and we can only take the refined route of special forces. When have you ever seen special forces chewing trenches with large troops? Circumvent, attack, and kill the sentry. These are the basic operations. In Westeros, which has a low productivity level, if there is a flexible lower limit, then poisoning water sources, setting fire to food, and assassinating important figures are all tricks that can be played. It's true that people in the north pay attention to honor, but the premise is that the people are still there. If it is incompatible with the environment, then the sense of honor can only become a hindrance. From Ed to Rob, it is a problem. In this case, Clay needs to adjust his training methods for Kristen in front of him and the future demon hunters who will join them later. And in this regard, he also needs to communicate with the old man. Kristen was left outside in the Godswood, and Clay entered his long-lost wolf's den alone. With his goal clear, he headed straight for the tower where the White Sea Guards were located. Sitting in his commander's seat, Clay gave an order to a black-clothed guard who came over. Call the 5 general managers and come here to see me. Tell them to sort out the latest information. I want to see it. 15 minutes later, all 5 managers were sitting in front of Clay, and in front of him were 5 pamphlets of the same specifications. The first person to speak was Snow, the intelligence chief of the Northern Territory. He hesitated and spoke his mind. Lord Commander, in accordance with your request, our manpower in the north has been gathered in Winterfell. During this period of observation, there is no difference between Lady Catherine and Bran Stark. I suggest that we withdraw some of our manpower. Come out? Give me a reason. Clay continued to browse the contents of the intelligence summary without raising his head. In the north, there are many objects worthy of monitoring, such as Snow was interrupted by Clay's answer before he could speak. Like the Skinners from the Dreadfort, right? Clay looked up and stared at him with a half-smile. He was choked, but Snow still nodded. Do as I say. The current Terror Fort is not yet under full surveillance. I have my own considerations. Clay waved his hand to end the topic. He put down the booklet with the crown stag in his hand, looked up at Waishui, the royal steward who was sitting on his left, and asked a question. Master Waishui, when I came back, the Earl mentioned to me that Lord Eddard Stark of King's Landing seems to be searching for His Majesty the King's illegitimate son. Tell me, what is going on? He actually knew very well Eddard Stark's intention to find the King's illegitimate son. Jon Arryn's last words were like a thread, allowing Eddard Stark, the detective, to peel off the cocoon bit by bit and find out the truth behind King's Landing. But since Waishui had also found out this, he wanted to know if there was any change between the current Junlin and his impression. My butterfly wings, the wind that I fanned, did it blow up the skirts of the important people in King's Landing? Chapter 88. A heavy rain is coming. Controller Waishui described the news from King's Landing bit by bit. Although it was complicated, Clay could still understand it. In fact, his butterfly effect still affected the smelly capital in the south. Because Bran was spared from disability and subsequent assassination, Catelyn Tully did not go south. Otherwise, by this time, White Harbor should have received the Raven message to prepare for war. According to the water controller, Tyrion Lannister successfully returned to King's Landing and still maintained his playboy style, hanging out in various brothels in King's Landing. He was not stopped in the Riverlands by the returning Catelyn Tully, and then shackled to the Eyrie. In addition to delaying the head-on conflict between the two families, it also brought about an unintended consequence. That was Eddard Stark's investigation in King's Landing, which was not affected by any direct external force at all. Originally, he would be blocked by Jaime Lannister at the door of the female branch investigating the king's illegitimate children, and then he injured a leg, and the Stark family guard who followed him to King's Landing also died. It can be said that as the Prime Minister, the strength around him and his own authority began to weaken from that time. A Prime Minister injured his leg by the Lannister Kingslayer on the street, but the latter was actually unscathed. The huge power difference between the Stark family and the Lannister family in King's Landing began to become apparent from this incident. In other words, if Duke Eddard Stark brought not hundreds of people into King's Landing, but thousands of people, look at who our beloved Lord Petter helps during the confrontation in the throne room. There are thousands of strong men from the north who are accustomed to fighting and only recognize the direwolf flag. Even if Eddard Stark closes the gate of the Red Keep and kills Cersei, Joffrey and all the Lannisters, he can sit on his own. It's okay on the Iron Throne. As long as no one knocks him off his chair, all the nobles in King's Landing will hold their noses and recognize that a soldier is the boss. This law will be useful wherever it is changed. In the famous dance of the dragons of the Targaryen dynasty 100 years ago, the Duke of the North, Cregan Stark, who led tens of thousands of troops into King's Landing at the end of the war, killed everyone in King's Landing. Clay knew very well how much blood there was behind the word wolf hour. Therefore, in the current King's Landing, the hundreds of people in Ed Stark's hands who have not lost anything are still a force that cannot be underestimated. After all, Robert has ruled King's Landing for so many years, and everyone knows how bad the Golden Robe is. If the investigation continues smoothly, and combined with the tome that Jon Arryn was reading before he died, perhaps Eddard Stark has figured out the truth about the Crown Prince's bloodline. After General Waishui finished reporting on the situation in King's Landing, he found that his commander was leaning on his seat without saying a word, frowning with a sullen face, not knowing what he was thinking about. Manager Waishui's words made him realize that the situation in King's Landing seemed to have undergone some unexpected changes inadvertently. Because of his damn sense of honor, Ed Stark kept making mistakes again and again in the quagmire of King's Landing, and the hundreds of people around him who didn't suffer any losses were the real deal. Without Tywin mobilizing troops in advance and letting the Mountain lead troops to harass the Riverlands, what reason would Ed Stark have for letting this force loyal to him leave King's Landing? Even if Robert eventually dies under the boar's tusks, will Cersei still meet Eddard Stark with swordsmanship as Clay remembers? The accumulation of these differences in small details may lead to a huge difference in the outcome. Clay is suddenly not sure where the fate of the Seven Kingdoms will eventually slide. For him, within a month, he could ensure that the number of the demon hunter team would be expanded to more than 5, which was not a big problem. If he was given more time, he would not hesitate to use up all the materials the old men got for him, extract enough magic power to upgrade the seals, and make 1 or 2 potions to arm his team of demon hunters. But it's hard to say. Clay didn't expect Lord Eddard Stark, who valued honor so much, to continue to stay in King's Landing and serve as Prime Minister like no one else, after discovering that the heir to the throne was a Lannister. Once Robert dies, the Stark who stays in King's Landing will inevitably encounter the Lannister with swords, but Clay doesn't know what the outcome will be. Now, Clay is only competing for time with himself. There are some things that he needs to speed up. When the Red Comet appears, it means that in the Eastern Land, the dragon comes to the world again. As a potential dragon controller, he must assimilate the blood of the Dragon King before this happens. If it was only late in the war that he managed to get the baby dragon that had just hatched out of its shell, it would really be better not to get it at all. The green dragon Rhaegar and the white dragon Viserys were both killed by spears. If Clay's dragon was smaller than them, it would not be of much use but would cause a lot of trouble. When you are a little stronger than others, others will try to get you off in front of them, but when you are far stronger than them, they will just kneel down and lick your toes. After thinking for a long time, he issued the first order of this meeting. Deploy all members of the White Sea Guards in the valley and the Riverlands to gather in King's Landing City, cooperate with the local forces in King's Landing, and do everything possible to understand the movements of Ed Stark himself and the Stark troops in King's Landing. Sir, 3 voices spoke, and the 3 managers involved all expressed doubts. They were not questioning the commander's decision, but wanted to know the purpose of doing so. No matter what, they were all Northerners at heart. The commander asked them to monitor the Northern Guard, Lord Ed, whom everyone respected, which puzzled them somewhat. He knew what they were asking, but Clay didn't want to explain. It couldn't be said that the king's heirs were all descended from Lannister incest. The king was going to meet the 7 gods soon, right? This kind of idiot speech is not explaining at all, but creating more trouble. I want to know the follow-up of Eddard Stark's search for the king's illegitimate son in King's Landing. Our lord will never do this for no reason. Clay compiled a useless interface. Wolf Cave now only knows about the matter itself, but the logic behind it is still unknown. Clay said this, which can be regarded as an explanation. As for the reports from several other managers, Clay did not hear anything unexpected. The valley was still closed and the White Sea Guards could learn very little. Because the manpower was lurking in the Western Territory, it was rare to see losses during this period, but this also meant that he lost an eye to get nailed to the Western Territory. But this question is not very important. There is chaos in King's Landing. No matter who wins, Tywin's movement of troops is a certainty. As for where will this assembled army go? That was of course Riverrun, the home of the Tullys, and Clay didn't even have the desire to guess. Chapter 89 Changes in King's Landing. Dragons have always been a question that Clay has been hesitant about. There is no need to discuss whether the blue gold dragon egg will hatch or not. Clay will definitely hatch it. After solving the problem of the Dragon King's bloodline, no one can stop him from having his own dragon. But the problem is, this is not raising a cat or a dog, this is a dragon, which is even more exciting than raising a mammoth. Not to mention the cost of raising it in the future, where to raise it is a big problem. He is not like Daenerys. When the noble lords of Westeros see dragons, they will think of their ancestors' fear of being dominated by the Targaryens. Look again, boy, you are not a Targaryen with silver hair and purple eyes. No matter why you have a dragon, I only care about what you want to do. No matter what, do you want to imitate Aegon I and become a conqueror again? Therefore, this matter, so far, is an investment that is both helpless and frustrating and has an extremely long return curve. Fortunately, when the war begins, most of the attention in Westeros will be focused on the battlefield in the south, which gives Clay a more relaxed environment. But even so, dragons cannot be raised in a densely populated place like White Harbor where there are eyes everywhere. Although the family can ensure the dragon's food supply, it absolutely cannot stop the news from leaking out. This means that Clay must find a sparsely populated place outside White Harbor to raise the dragon. This place must have sufficient food sources and cannot be too far from White Harbor. To be honest, this is an extremely high requirement, but for Clay, the key to this issue is not whether there is such a place, but whether he can be ruthless. When I opened the map, I saw that there were 3 islands next to each other on the sea in the center of Biting Bay, south of White Harbor. Their name is the Three Sisters Islands, consisting of Tianji Island, Changji Island and Miss Island. Although it is nominally under the banner of the Eagle's Nest City, in fact, I swear to the old and new gods, the Eagle's Nest City has no energy at all there. The Sunderland family that rules there is actually more like pirate leaders than nobles. They are cunning and capricious. The so-called loyalty is nothing in their eyes. In the past, this island group, which was almost a paradise for pirates, derived a large part of its income from their deliberate efforts to induce the sinking of ships carrying property and then pick up corpses from the sunken ships. Although Stannis, who had a tough temper and was as stubborn as a rock, was the Sea Lord, he led the royal fleet to help the Three Sisters Islands get rid of these bad habits. But in fact, most of the pirates' dens in Biting Bay are on these three small islands. Let's put it this way, now Clay takes a sword and kills everyone he sees, but he doesn't kill 8 out of 10 people. Wrong. Historically, the North and the Valley were owned by the Three Sisters Islands and protracted wars broke out. Now, the Three Sisters Islands, which are almost completely independent, will never touch the ships in the Valley and White Harbor for the fleets coming and going. As for the rest, it is embarrassing. Once this place is blocked, it will be a natural treasure land for raising dragons. As long as those big families don't come here deliberately to cause trouble, with the Manderly family's fleet, there is no big problem in blocking the Biting Bay. Send troops to the Three Sisters Islands, completely bulldoze this pirate den, and then use the fleet to block the Bite Bay. As long as this lasts for a year or two, the dragon will grow to the size that it can ride on and fly, and this place will have completed its mission. Although the Sunderland family has always maintained respect for the Manderly family, that was now, not before. The blood feud in history has always filled the hearts of these islanders with hatred for the North. For Clay, all he had to do was be ruthless and cause an incident where White Harbor soldiers were lost on the Three Sisters Island, and then send troops directly. It was such a good excuse. But there is a prerequisite for doing this. War must break out and the northern border is in a wartime state. Sending troops privately is not a good time at this juncture. 20 days have passed since Clay came out of the wolf's den. Although the news from King's Landing became more complicated day by day, the signal Clay was waiting for never appeared. However, Clay didn't care about this thing today, because today was a day of double happiness for him. Last night, after he endured the severe pain in his heart for the last time, the remaining piece of Dragon King's blood was completely assimilated by him. When the last blood clot disappeared, an unprecedented sense of power filled his body. He felt his magic boiling. He knew that in addition to Targaryen, there was a brand new bloodline of the Dragon King in the world. His affinity for fire magic allowed him to save the 300 points of magic power for his Igni Seal and jump directly to level 2. He can now skillfully master the use of the flame stream of the Igni Seal. In addition to the bloodline issue being resolved, today, Raven, the 5th demon hunter he presided over who completed the mutation, officially joined the special team he organized. Counting him, there are 6 people in total. In addition to Raven, who finally completed the mutation, Kristen, Jalen, Garland, Desmond and Clay himself, the demon hunter who is now standing under the Poseidon Tower, all 5 seals have been learned. Clay customized special armor for each of them. It was not a heavy armor with extremely strong defense, but a special armor that took into account both defense and flexibility. During this time, Clay started training with Chryson, and then as the mutation continued, he started to teach one after another. They were able to release the seals they wanted to use very smoothly. In addition, Clay began to train them in swordsmanship and began to instill in them the concept of individual combat. Most of the time, these people's positions on the battlefield will be in the enemy's weak rear. As for the frontal confrontation of the army, their personal local advantages will be of little help to the victory or defeat of the entire war. The first thing Clay taught them was to abandon the damn sense of honor and stop having stupid thoughts about whether they would be defeated if they did so. This kind of thinking would kill them. The second point is that Clay wants them to learn to think independently and how to complete tasks by themselves without being under their own command. In the previous war model, the soldiers at the bottom would not bring their brains to the battlefield at all. The commanders, usually nobles, would let them fight wherever they wanted. They would rush forward when they won and disperse when they lost. But this kind of undisciplined and mindless behavior is absolutely unacceptable to Clay. Fortunately, after several rounds of screening by the 2 most experienced old men in White Harbor, none of the remaining ones were fools. Although these ideas were too avant-garde, these new recruits of demon hunters quickly got on the road. In the courtyard, 5 figures stood on the ground, like 5 javelins stuck in the ground. Clay looked at his masterpiece with a smile of great satisfaction on his face. But this slightly proud excitement did not last long. An uninvited guest barged in regardless of the guard's obstruction. With his back turned, Clay heard the footsteps far away and frowned and looked back. When he saw who it was, he was startled. Chief Waishui, why is he here? People from Wolf's Den will never come to White Harbor unless there is an urgent matter. This is the rule. There was a thump in Clay's heart. Before Clay could speak, a letter from Raven was thrust into his hand. The frighteningly dark-faced water controller shook off the guard who wanted to pull him away, and said in an extremely serious voice, "My lord, there are changes in King's Landing." "I'm coming." Chapter 90. The king is dead and his majesty is gone. After opening the note, it took Clay less than a minute to read the information that shocked the entire Seven Kingdoms. King Robert Baratheon I was attacked by a wild boar while hunting in the Kingswood and died 2 days after returning to King's Landing. Lord Eddard Stark, Hand of the King, openly claimed that Joffrey Baratheon, the heir to the throne, was the result of incest between Queen Cersei and the Kingslayer Jaime Lannister and had no right to inherit the Iron Throne at all. The two sides faced off in the throne room, and clashes broke out after Cersei Lannister tore up the king's edict. Eddard Stark fought his way out of King's Landing with hundreds of elite northern troops and fled north. Most of his troops were damaged and are currently missing. The new king, Joffrey Baratheon, has proclaimed himself king in King's Landing and declared that the former Hand of the King, Duke Eddard Stark, had committed treason, calling on the nobles of the Seven Kingdoms to arrest the traitor. Due to the lack of manpower in King's Landing, it was not possible for the White Sea Guards to send messages 1 day at a time. This letter should have been sent 4 days ago, because it would take time for the Raven to fly to White Harbor. But no matter what, Clay knew that the war broke out. The letter didn't say it, but Clay must have known that Stannis and Renly must have left King's Landing before the king's death. It's impossible to say that the crown was already on his head by now. The fierceness in his eyes suddenly broke out, and he suddenly looked at the silent manager Waishui standing aside. His voice was extremely serious. "Does the Earl know about this?" Shaking his head, General Controller Waishui certainly knew what the arrival of this letter meant. The commander's concern for King's Landing was completely correct. This was a truly earth-shattering change. "My lord, Wolf's Den should be the first to get the news. We don't know whether King's Landing's letter to the whole country has been sent or when it will arrive." Clay nodded. He understood what the water controller meant. Of course King's Landing knew how the northern nobles would react when they learned that the lord was being hunted. It was estimated that only Winterfell would receive the news. It was useless to say anything now. Clay immediately gave the order, regardless of whether the place was suitable or not. "Order, withdraw half of the people in King's Landing and maintain basic news channels. I will gather the remaining people in the Riverlands and the west. As for the Riverlands, please figure out the terrain there for me. You can't make any mistakes for me." Ignoring the look in the eyes of Chief Waishui, Clay didn't realize that this order should be given to Chief Huon. He said to himself, "I'm sure it must be a battlefield there." After a pause, he looked at Controller Waishui again. When their eyes met, he revealed his arrangements for the Western Territory. "The people in the Western region have only one job. Find out for me how many people the Old Land can get from the Western region. Do you understand?" Manager Waishui did not respond to this sentence, but just caressed his chest and saluted, turned around, rushed out of the courtyard, mounted his horse and ran straight to the Wolf's Den. When the war comes, intelligence arrives earlier and can be of great use at critical moments. After giving the order to the assembled Witcher team to disband and teach Raven the seal as soon as possible, Clay forced himself to calm down. Now, the top priority is to tell the old man the news and see what his plans are. Poseidon Tower, Conference Hall. Members of the Manderly family, from the older generation of Earl Wyman and Sir Malone, to Clay's fathers Willis and Wendell, to him and his sister Wilfield, and sister Vera, the main line of the Manderly family, they all came to this conference room that had not been used for a long time. Except for Clay, everyone was shocked by the sudden news. The news was so exciting that they still haven't recovered from it. Seven hells, what the hell is going on? The old man made a sound that he was not aware of, but it was indeed a reflection of everyone's heart. Sure enough, as Clay expected, no ravens came to White Harbor from King's Landing at all. From the beginning, a clear line had been drawn between the North and King's Landing. Different from the original, at this time, because Ed Stark had more than 100 soldiers with extremely strong fighting ability, Facing Jan Wusheng's golden robe of King's Landing, he actually broke through the siege directly. But now the question arises. No one knows where the Guardian of the North, who has been accused of treason, is. Dead or alive. Everyone, what should we do now? We need to come up with an idea. The speaker was Sir Malone. As the first person to sort himself out, his question pointed to the most important issue at the moment. What else can we do? Father, I will assemble the army right away and go south to the Neck to bring Lord Ed back. It was Clay's father Wendell who spoke. This professional soldier's way of thinking about problems was also very simple. He could sum it up in one sentence, and that was it. Shut your mouth. Have the orders from Winterfell arrived? Do you know where Lord Eddard is now? Send troops without knowing anything? What do you think? Count Wyman, who came to his senses, severely rejected his son's suggestion. At this time, the eldest son Willis spoke to save his brother. Father, Wendell's words are indeed lacking some consideration, but we still have to gather this army. His health has never been ideal. After saying this, he fell silent and had no intention of continuing to explain. However, everyone present understood one thing. Regardless of whether Eddard Stark returns north of the Neck alive, conflict between the Starks and the Lannisters is inevitable. Clay, you were there when the king was in Winterfell. Tell us, what is said in the news, is the child king really the bastard of Lannister? The old man seemed to have thought of something and suddenly asked. This issue is not important at this stage, but it is related to who can stand on the opposite side of the Lannister family in future wars. Although the enemy of your enemy is not necessarily your friend, it is enough if you can help you fight against your opponent. With a sneer, Clay said coldly. If you had seen that idiot, you probably wouldn't have hesitated. I assure you, Joffrey is not worthy of sitting on that iron chair. Earl Wyman frowned slightly. He didn't know why his grandson was so confident, but he believed in his grandson's judgment. Moreover, he had heard to some extent the comments about the Crown Prince being too similar to his mother and uncle. Seeing that everyone's eyes were on him, Clay straightened up from his chair and expressed his opinion. Winterfell is at most 2 days behind us. They will definitely get the news. Based on my understanding of Stark's acting city lord, it is certain that he summoned the vassals for his father. Whether we fight directly or fight after the negotiation is over, I don't know, but we must fight based on it. Clay's voice gradually grew louder. Grandpa, we can't delay any longer. Although our Manderly family has always stood under the direwolf flag, at this time we must be prepared for a rainy day. My suggestion is to immediately summon the family knights to assemble. At the same time, the family's speed of assembling new warships must be accelerated. We cannot guarantee other places, but Biting Bay and the eastern coast of the north must be under the control of my Manderly family. This is no small matter. If the Bite Bay is blocked, won't the pirates on the Three Sisters Islands blow up their nest? Sir Malone felt that Clay's suggestion was still a bit risky. Pirates? When the war starts, can we still allow other people's warships to sail directly to White Harbor? Clay's face was filled with a strange light, and he finished the following words in an extremely calm tone. I, Manderly, are happy because I think Sunderland is a noble. I, Manderly, are not happy. They are just pirates who disturbed my caravan and robbed my fleet. There is nothing to say about pirates. Destroy them, leaving no one behind. Chapter 91 Family Background. Clay's young body and the sound he made everyone at the table look sideways. A young man who is decisive in killing, people like Earl Wyman and Sir Malone who have read The Floating World, the first thing to consider when encountering this kind of thing is to wait for the will of Winterfell. And the heir to the Manderly family, who had brought them countless surprises, was already considering the complete destruction of a family. To be fair, even with Earl Wyman's sophistication, he cannot deny that his grandson's proposal is very practical. White Harbor has a fairly impressive fleet, but in the battle sequence in the north it has never made any actual achievements. The reason is very simple. Because of the existence of the Three Sisters Islands, the position of the White Harbor fleet is open to the entire south. Without its stealth, the advantages brought by the fleet's high mobility are gone. Over the years, Earl Wyman has been looking for an opportunity to deal with this trouble, but it is obvious that King Robert has ruled for these years and he has never waited for the opportunity. Good at using weapons in peacetime, even if the Manderly family occupied the Three Sisters Islands, they would not eventually get there. This was the most serious family meeting in more than 10 years, and the Manderly family, which controlled White Harbor, began to shift from peace to war. Weapons began to be distributed and armies began to assemble. Under the strong promotion of Clay Mandler, the young master of White Harbor, although the ravens of the Stark family in Winterfell have not yet arrived, everyone in White Harbor knew that the family ready for war. Poseidon Tower, Count Wyman's study. As a continuation of the family meeting at noon, 3 people sat in this spacious study: Earl Wyman, his eldest son Willis, and Clay. Wendell and Sir Malone, who knew how to lead troops, were already in the army at this time. White Harbor's financial resources allowed the Manderly family to have the only standing army in the north with more than 500 men. The Manderly family's army was expanded based on these 500 men. Even so, the combat effectiveness of the Manderly family army is actually not as good as that of the northern nobles. If a Stark warrior were to challenge the Manderly guards in a duel, there is a high probability that the former would beat the latter to the ground. Down. The old man lit the fireplace in the room. The weather has been getting colder and colder recently. This extremely long summer is finally coming to an end. Grandpa, can you tell me how many soldiers our Manderly family can organize? This is actually a question that Clay was puzzled by when he first arrived in Westeros. According to what the old man said at the beginning, he could assemble 1,500 heavy armored cavalry. This number, compared to the northern border, is always a very large cavalry force, but the problem is that when it is compared with the population of Byport, something goes wrong. After Clay returned to White Harbor, he had learned about the approximate population ratio of White Harbor. As he expected, in this era of unprecedented medical resources, the population was extremely young. Because apart from the nobles, there are only a few people who can live to old age. A small wound or a small cold can kill someone, it's so true. The population of Beijing exceeds 200,000. What is the concept? Assuming that the ratio of men to women is 1:1, it means that there are 100,000 men here. Based on such a young population, the most conservative estimate is that there will be 50,000 people who can carry weapons on the battlefield. Draw 1 out of 5, and this will be an army of 10,000. Damn it, who is the boss in the north? Why doesn't Clay know that his family is so powerful? Later, after further research, I discovered that the algorithm just mentioned is theoretically correct. However, due to the backward social system, the Manderly family has no ability to recruit this huge population. Yes, these people who have lived in White Harbor for generations have been paying taxes to the Manderly family honestly, but the problem is that the family has no means to organize them. You know, the conscripts and the soldiers raised are fundamentally 2 different things. If they could all be organized, then King's Landing, with a population of nearly 1 million, would be a serious god of war in Westeros. Why else would Robert fight the usurper's war? The Targaryen family, which has ruled for nearly 300 years, does not include the royal family and the nobles. In King's Landing, if one of the 5 soldiers is drawn, that is an army of 100,000. If Robert comes, he will be pressed to the ground and rubbed. There is still a big gap between reality, and Clay, who understands clearly, is convinced. Are you asking now? Or when there is plenty of time? The old man asked his grandson. The army cannot be formed with just a few clicks. Ask them all. I want to know how much power we have. Of course, as the head of a family, the old man knew about this question. He raised his chubby palm and compared it with a number. Now, if Winterfell asks me to go south immediately, I can only send out 500 men, 500 cavalry, and 2 infantry. This is the most. In fact, some people have to be left to guard White Harbor. There won't be so many. But if you give me enough time, I will double this number, 500 cavalry, 500 infantry, or even more. As long as we can produce golden dragons, those mercenaries who only fart in the tavern will also join us. Us. Nodding, Clay finally understood the chips he had before the first round of this war. He knew how many pieces he had in his pocket, so that he could make accurate bets, right? What do you mean? You want to lead the troops yourself? The old man suddenly looked at him. Uncle Willis, who had been silent all this time, also took his eyes away from the bonfire and looked here carefully. Clay shrugged. He didn't think he could stay in White Harbor and watch others go south to fight to the death. He had to go if he couldn't say a word to Robb. My father called us here to talk about this matter. Willis suddenly spoke, and Clay was startled, not quite understanding what he meant. Father, it is impossible to go to the battlefield. One of you and I must lead the troops south. Since you haven't come back, this burden must be mine. Uncle Willis's words completely awakened Clay. Yes, The decent heirs of Winterfell have all raised their troops and gone south. Can you, Manderly, also send one? This is just like gambling, it's a matter of whether you follow or not. Moreover, there is also the issue of the attitude of the Manderly family in this war. Clay, actually, I don't really want you to go. The old man spoke with some difficulty. Although one day he goes to see the Seven Gods, the Earl of White Harbor will definitely fall on Willis first, but when Willis is gone, Clay will become the new master of White Harbor. Willis is the present and Clay is the future. More importantly, Clay now has no legitimate children, not even an illegitimate child. If something unexpected happens on the battlefield, the Manderly family will return to the state it was in before Clay returned. This is something the family cannot bear. Price. Clay understood the old man's worries, but he had to participate in this war. What he had and what he would have forced him not to remain mediocre. Clay decided to show the old man another important thing, which would completely tilt the balance in his heart. Dragon egg, it's time to let the old man know. In a few words, after solving the dragon problem, Clay will immediately lead his troops south, with blood and fire, and gold and iron horses behind him. Because the old wolf has a different ending in King's Landing, some interesting things will happen in the direction of this war. Variety. I have a story. Can you give me a glass of wine? Chapter 92. Clay is serious about breaking the dragon monopoly. In the evening, Clay carried a wooden box and walked into the brightly lit Poseidon Tower again. Although the news of the king's death has not been officially announced, there is no airtight wall in the world. The Manderly family army has begun to gather, so naturally it will not be completely concealed from the public. Clay could clearly feel the almost palpable smell of tension among the people coming and going in the Poseidon Tower. During the conversation in the afternoon, the old man had not made a decision on who would lead the army. He was not in a hurry because the raven from Winterfell had not arrived yet and was not expected to arrive until tomorrow at the earliest. Arriving at the study, the guard guarding the door was leaning against the wall, playing with a small object in his hand. Seeing his young master coming, the guard quickly stood up and subconsciously hid the objects in his hands, but Clay still saw him. What is that? Clay raised his chin, pointed at the guard's left hand, and asked with a smile. The candlelight flickered, reflecting the guard's face. He was a little embarrassed, and he took out the things in his hands. Clay took it and squinted his eyes. This thing seemed to be a small shield, about the size of a palm, wrapped in a layer of rough stitched wool. The inside was hard and should be wood. Although in the shadows, Clay's vision still allowed him to see the words above clearly. Vida and LV. Glancing at the reddened sneer expression on the guard's face, Clay suddenly understood what this thing was. He tossed the object, then returned it to its owner, and said with a smile, "Is she our girl from White Harbor?" As soon as these words came out, the guard knew that the young master had seen through him, and could only nod sheepishly. Yes, her family has lived in White Harbor for generations. Get married? No, she's engaged. No, there's going to be a war. Her family doesn't have much money, so she can't do anything to help me, so she just made this thing. Not noticing the young master who suddenly fell silent, the guard seemed to be caught up in some beautiful memories, and the corners of his mouth rose unconsciously. He continued, "We agreed that after the war is over and I bring back good things from the battlefield, I will buy her a big house in Fish King Square, bring her family here, and then we will get married." Just as he was thinking about it, the guard heard his young master's voice, and he said, "Take it. When you come back from the battlefield, I will be your witness." Without looking at the extremely excited expression on the guard's face, Clay directly opened the door and walked into the old man's study. In the study, the old man leaned back in his chair and was staring at the blazing fire in a trance, not noticing the arrival of his grandson. Clay noticed that the old man had an open bottle of summer red on his hand, but it was obvious that the old man had never drank it. It wasn't until Clay pulled up a chair and sat in front of the old man, his young body blocking the old man's sight, that the old man came back to his senses and realized that Clay was here. "Boy, what's the expression on your face? What happened?" As people grow older, the old man noticed his grandson's abnormal mood at a glance, so he asked directly. "Nothing, just a little emotional." Clay told his grandfather exactly what had just happened, and with one order he went to the battlefield, even for those who were about to get married. In the original story, more than 10,000 northern troops went south, but in the end only 3,000 or 4,000 came back, and the rest were all buried in the south. Clay had always felt that he could maintain a chess player's mindset and view the war, but at this moment, he felt a little unnecessary emotion. After listening carefully, the old man didn't say anything. He couldn't pat his grandson on the shoulder across the table. So, he followed the old Manderly family tradition and poured Clay a full glass of wine. I tell you what young people think. Thinking so much is a waste of time. On the battlefield, if you kill me and I kill you, how many will survive? The old man smiled quite coolly, pointed at himself, then at Clay, and then said, "We noble lords usually show off their power, but when it comes to the battlefield, we have a sword and a head. We can only survive if we kill everyone who swings a sword at you. It's that simple." Earl Wyman actually understood his grandson's thoughts very well. When he was young, he would feel unhappy when encountering this kind of thing. However, after the usurper war was over, he no longer had such emotions. Too many people died and he was numb. After waiting for a while, he saw that Clay had finished the glass of wine. The old man's attention was attracted by the wooden box that Clay brought. He tapped his fingers on it and said doubtfully, "What is this thing? It's so mysterious that you only come to me at night when no one is around?" Clay, who had already tidied himself up, took a deep breath, stared into his grandfather's eyes with bright eyes, and said only one word: "Dragon." Visible to the naked eye, the old man was stunned and blinked several times, as if he suspected that he had heard wrongly. "What the hell? Say it again." "A dragon, to be precise, a dragon egg." Clay opened the box directly and saw clearly what was inside. The old man's broad body jumped up from the chair, dumbfounded and dumbfounded. After waiting for an unknown amount of time, the old man came back to his senses. Although he had never seen the dragon egg, just by taking a look at the contents of the box, the old man knew that his grandson had definitely not lied to him. When he reacted, he didn't understand why his grandson showed him a dragon egg he got from nowhere late at night. An extremely ridiculous idea flashed in his mind. Could it be? The next second, Clay's words made his blood pressure, which had just dropped, rise again. "Grandpa, what if I told you that I could hatch the thing inside, and then wait for it to grow up and ride it to conquer the sky?" His eardrums clearly caught the old man's heavy breathing, and Clay knew he had to explain clearly. "At the beginning, this dragon egg and a blood-red crystal were discovered by me along with the secrets of the Valyrian warriors." Although he didn't want to lie, Clay couldn't do anything about this kind of thing. "I never figured out what the crystal was, so I kept carrying it with me. One morning when I woke up, I suddenly couldn't find it and there was an unusual feeling in my body. It wasn't until later that I understood what it was. It was the blood of a certain noble dragon king that was solidified by magic before the collapse of the Valyrian Empire. Only warriors who possess the blood of the Dragon King and have experienced mutations are the closest guards to the Dragon Kings of ancient Valyria. If Earl Wyman and everyone in the family hadn't remembered Clay's appearance, the old man would have even suspected for a moment that Clay was being impersonated. But this idea was quickly rejected by him. Apart from Targaryen, there is no real blood of the Dragon King in the world. Clay cannot be a Targaryen. Moreover, with the magical power that shocked him, and now the dragon egg, if Clay was fake, why would he return to White Harbor? If you have this ability, you can hatch the dragon egg yourself. In a few years, you can ride a dragon and conquer wherever you want, right? The old man believes in his own judgment. This is his grandson. He cannot be wrong. Taking a breath of cold air, Earl Wyman forced himself to calm down. He has realized that if the family has a dragon and can control it, according to his grandson, this is a change in blood, which means this can be passed on to future generations. This means that the Manderly family will become the new dragon family in Westeros after the Targaryen family. That night, the old man didn't know how many times he confirmed whether Clay could hatch the dragon. The old man, like Clay, has been keenly aware that the Manderly family must closely guard this secret until the dragon becomes big enough. He suddenly remembered his grandson's strong desire to conquer the Three Sisters Islands during the family meeting. The old man, who was familiar with the terrain, immediately understood his grandson's thoughts. "Boy, after I saw the dragon, I swore to the old and new gods that the flag of the Manderly family would be planted in every corner of the Three Sisters Islands." This is the old man's promise to Clay and the future Manderly family. Typos will be posted first and corrected later. Please subscribe, please subscribe, please subscribe. Just a quick chat, gentlemen, please don't bother me. In the original book, the Manderly family is the family that said the North will never be forgotten. Their loyalty to Stark is unquestionable. Now, the protagonist has a dragon. I write here that the old man accepted the existence of dragons. The reason is, as I will mention later. I am a Manderly first and a Stark vassal second. My family comes first. I think this is understandable. Moreover, my understanding of the world of ice and fire is that between nobles and nobles, the laws of the kingdom are not important. They basically follow the simple law of homomorphic revenge. The Mad King killed Stark's people, so history the Tuckers are about to overthrow the Targaryens. Having said that, I don't think the old man hates dragons that much, and I believe everyone can understand why he is in a different place with Targaryen, who has a very strong connection with him. I think this is also an unavoidable problem for everyone who depicts the story of Game of Thrones. The Seven Kingdoms are all arrogant except for Dorne. Unless you are alone, how to explain it to your family is an unavoidable problem. Including the changes brought about by the Witcher, and as the dragon grows up, it is inevitable to be discovered. In the future, I will gradually let the members of the Manderly family accept the existence of dragons, and even have the opportunity to talk to Clay. Together, we ride a giant dragon and soar through the 9 heavens. I like that kind of picture very much. As a Chinese, the spiritual totem of dragon is not our traditional Chinese dragon, but I like it after all. Chapter 93 Raven, Dragon. Clay and the old man discussed it all night long. In the end, there was no place to put the empty wine bottle on the table between the grandfather and grandson. Even so, the two people were still arguing enthusiastically. The arrival of the dragon meant that many of the family's arrangements had to be completely changed. As the patriarch, this was something the old man had to consider. Clay asked the old man how he planned to face the Stark family if he actually flew over Westeros with a dragon in the future. This question made the old man purse his lips and remain silent for a long time. Finally, the old man slowly uttered a sentence. I am a Manderly first and then a Stark vassal. After understanding what this meant, Clay never mentioned it again. Obviously, this was not a pleasant topic. The old man and Clay finally reached a consensus that Clay needed to hatch the dragon as soon as possible before the Manderly family army went to the King's Road to join the Winterfell army. During this period, the old man will directly raise troops to defeat the Three Sisters Islands, and Clay's dragon will be placed there to grow. According to the old man's original intention, Clay should stay in White Harbor, followed by the Three Sisters Islands, and ignore the battlefield in the south, but Clay rejected the old man's idea. After making great military exploits in the south, returning to the north with countless honors, and then showing the dragon card, Clay didn't know what the adults in the north would think. However, if he does not participate in this war, later, whether the northern army fails or succeeds, he hides in White Harbor and suddenly makes a dragon, there will be no other way except being regarded as an evil dragon. Clay didn't want to use dragon flames to subdue these rebellious northern adults, not at all. The next day, when Clay came out of the study swaying and smelling of alcohol, a letter from Winterfell instantly sobered him up. Just after walking out of the study, Clay hurriedly turned around and pushed the door open. A letter from Winterfell. Robb Stark, the young master of the Stark family, gathered his vassals in Winterfell, assembled an army, and headed south to the Neck to demand an explanation for his father's experience. More importantly, they must find Lord Eddard Stark, the Duke of the North, who is in crisis, before Lord Tywin. Half an hour later, the family meeting was held again. This time, all actions were no longer castles in the air, because the arrival of this recruitment order meant that the North had declared war on the Iron Throne. To be more precise, he declared war on the Lannister king on the Iron Throne, and of course, Lord Tywin of the Westerlands. Joffrey was not Robert, and he didn't even have a hair of the prestige of his father. If he hadn't had an extremely powerful grandfather, Lord Tywin Lannister, the Iron Chair under her but would have belonged to someone else long ago. With his level, all the soldiers in the Western region would be useless to him. Clay didn't know what was going on in the Riverlands now, but he didn't think Lord Tywin would give up this good opportunity to attack the Riverlands. The incident happened suddenly, and the Riverlands were not prepared at all. Although the Riverlands' military strength was weak, if the Tully family of Riverrun summoned vassals, given the population size of the Riverlands, 20,000 people could always be drawn out. If the Lannister army attacks again at that time, although they will win in the end, the process will be much more tortuous. Lord Eddard's son, Robb Stark, has given the Manderly family a recruitment order, but we don't need to lead the army to Winterfell. The army can just go west and meet at the King's Road. The old man's words were the beginning of this meeting. Willis asked his brother, Wendell, how is the army gathering going? Wendell, who had been staying in the military camp and hurried back, answered his brother's question quickly. They are all young men. There are still too few veterans. It is impossible for us in White Harbor to send out all the veterans. Now, counting all those who can move in the military camp, 400 people. Wendell shook his head with regret and said helplessly, "The time is too short. We only know 1 or 2 days before Winterfell. In this short time, it is still a problem to accurately distribute the equipment to the soldiers. If we have 2 months and a little training, the situation will be much better." All the members participating in the meeting seemed to understand the problem Wendell said, and no one refuted it. Try your best. It will take time to assemble the army in Winterfell. According to experience, even if Robb Stark is in a hurry, it will take at least nearly a month for each family to arrive before heading south. We still have time. Having participated in the Usurpers' War, the old man has valuable experience in these matters. Hearing this, Wendell was slightly relieved. Most of these recruited soldiers turned out to be farmers, fishermen, free riders, and even small businessmen. If they directly compete with the Lannister standing army without training, although the Northerners are more brave than the Seven Kingdoms, the exchange ratio will be ugly. 1 month younger is just 1 month younger. Wendell compressed the time to improve the strength of these new recruits. However, Earl Wymon's next words frustrated his plan. The old man said to him directly, "Wendell, leave the training to Malone. You led the troops and Lord Stannis to kill the pirates. This time, I want you to bring all the warships in the family to knock down the pirate den in the Three Sisters Islands." This order, which he had not communicated with anyone before, immediately stunned Wendell. Of course he knew where the Three Sisters Islands were, but why would his father let him take it down? Knock it down and then seal off the entire Biting Bay. No ship can come in. I'll sink every one I see. Although Wendell was puzzled by Earl Wymon's order, as a pure soldier, he was still prepared to resolutely implement his father's order. "Father, if we do this, will Winterfell have an answer?" Willis raised his concerns. Interestingly, he and Wendell did not consider the feelings of the ruling family on the island at all. It is estimated that in their hearts, those people were not nobles at all, but pirates. Killing pirates, adhering to the will of the Seven Gods, what kind of psychological construction is needed? Regarding his son's question, Earl Wymon waved his hand. Obviously, this was not a too serious problem. The White Harbor Fleet will protect the security of the east coast of the north during the war. This reason is enough. As for the west coast, the White Harbor Fleet has no choice but to bypass the entire Westeros, right? After the old man finished speaking this question, he looked at his grandson. "Clay, please take care of your own affairs during this period. Leave the top room of Poseidon Tower to you. When the army is assembled, you will be their commander-in-chief, and Sir Malone will go with you." Clay understood what the old man meant. The old man asked him to complete the hatching of the dragon eggs at the place where the grass decoction was synthesized. Father Wendell would lead his troops to wipe out the Three Sisters Islands, and then Clay would send the dragon there to be raised for a period of time. This is a plan for small dragons that cannot fly too far. If the dragon grows up and can fly out of the Bite Bay, then Clay will ride it, and the dragon will come to Westeros. Chapter 94. Above the sky, blood and fire blend. Welcoming the dragon back into this world. If there is a way of heaven in this world, then this is going against heaven. The weather was dark and cloudy, and it looked like a heavy rain was coming. Standing on the top floor of the towering Poseidon Tower, the howling sea breeze passed through the stone pillars and hit Clay hard on the face. At the same time, it blew his long forehead hair and let them flutter in the air. Clay's eyes moved away from the fleet in the port, which was preparing to go out, and looked towards the sea in the east. At the end of his sight, he could not see land. But he knew that on the continent east of the strait, a girl as young as him would soon use a blood sacrifice, using the Targaryen blood as a guide, to bet 3 lives, and eventually produce the powerful magic power awakened the dragon in the stone. But now time is not on his side. It is impossible for him to sacrifice his blood, but he still wants to hatch his own dragon with his own hands. Before coming here again, Clay filled his body with up to 500 points of magic power in one breath. This was already the limit of his body, and he once again experienced the feeling of being almost unable to move even an inch. "I have prepared so much and have been waiting for this day." The murmurs were blown away by the strong wind, and Clay no longer hesitated and walked into the room located at the top of the tower, high in the sky. Locking the door, Clay checked the side carefully. This time he hatched, he must not be disturbed. The old man issued the strictest order. No one can enter the top of Poseidon Tower. Intruders will be killed without any reason. Opening the partition at the highest point of the tower and opening all the windows at the same time, Clay wanted to set a fire today, and he couldn't do it without enough oxygen. There was nothing in the room except for a shelf made of the most flame-resistant wood in the center. If Clay hadn't known what it was used for, he might have used it as a cremation platform. Take the blue gold dragon egg out of the inventory and place it firmly in the center of the wooden shelf. The new Dragon King bloodline was pulsing in his heart. This powerful bloodline power that combined the two powers gave Clay the same abilities as Daenerys, who was not yet the mother of dragons on the other side of the strait. He is not afraid of fire. This was something he only realized after one night. Juice tears fell on his hand, but he felt no pain at all. Putting his fingers into the candle flame, Clay confirmed his guess. The flames jumped at his fingertips, but nothing happened to his fingers. All he felt was heat. I wonder when I will also have the title of Unburnt One. Clay smiled, then took off his clothes. It's not that I have any hobbies, but if I don't do this, this expensively fake aristocratic costume will probably turn into a wisp of fly ash under the blazing flames. Although he has huge wealth, he will not waste it on such things. As for your hair? Oh, it's not important anymore. The blue gold dragon egg still looked radiant even in the dim light. His intuition told him that what hatched would be a very beautiful little guy. Already ready, Clay no longer hesitated and pointed his left hand at the wood, magic power surging. Witcher seal, Igni, stream of flame, release. A bright stream of fire suddenly spurted out from the palm of Clay's left hand, illuminating the dark room. The wood used as a kindling ignites instantly and is covered with grease, which is the best combustion accelerant. A heat wave instantly filled the entire room, and the fire spread to the entire bottom of the wooden frame within a few minutes. This small circular room makes the heating effect of the flame more obvious. Taking a deep breath, Clay sent his body into the flickering flames. The high temperature alone could not awaken the magic dragon in the stone. Now, it's time to offer the most pious blood for this grand sacrifice. With a flash of light, the dagger, which was the only one used in this ceremony, cut Clay's wrist open. In an instant, blood spurted out and sprinkled on the blue gold shell of the dragon egg. The bright red blood beads, paired with the blue gold shell, have an enchanting beauty in the bright firelight. He could feel his blood draining, but Clay gritted his teeth and did not stop. The three-eyed crow's method did not specify how many ml of the Dragon King's blood was needed to awaken a dragon egg. He wants to use all of it within the scope of what he can bear. Wisps of blood were evaporated, but inadvertently, some blood merged into the blue gold dragon egg. Now that the sacrifice has been offered, now should be the moment for the magic to surge. The bloated magic power in his body finally found a way to vent. Clay covered his hands on the dragon egg, blood dripped from the breach, and magic power flowed out from his fingertips. Their common goal, under the scorching fire, is getting hotter and hotter at this time. Outside the Poseidon Tower, the people of the Manderly family in White Harbor stood in shock, raising their necks and looking at the top of the family's main building. The smoke from burning wood flew out of the window, forming a thick column of smoke in mid-air under the evening sky. Poseidon Tower caught fire? This is a big deal, especially now that war is coming. Countless residents of White Harbor who finally came to the Manderly family came straight to the family's new castle, with various vessels filled with water. The guards stationed on the walls of New Castle have long received orders from Earl Wyman. There may be abnormal situations at the top of the Poseidon Tower tonight. They must stick to their posts, and there must be no chaos in White Harbor. Although they could not tell them the truth, the majesty of the old Earl who had ruled White Harbor for decades still made these family guards loyally carry out the orders. As a result, these anxious White Harbor people who went to put out the fire were stopped in front of the city gate of New Castle. They were told that the family was under control of the situation there, and that the family also had enough water in the New Castle, so they should rest assured. The crowd gradually dispersed, but the eyes of countless people were still attracted by the plume of smoke that shot straight into the sky. They discussed what the family was doing. As the only insider, the old man personally moved a chair and sat on the stairs leading to the top floor. The family sword was placed in his hand. No one can go up tonight. The old man has not taken out this sword for more than 10 years since the Usurper War. Although it is not a sword made of Valyrian steel, this sword placed here represents the absolute authority of the family. Any member of the Manderly family must bow before this sword. Everyone in the family came, but after seeing the old man's unyielding expression, they finally left. Whether they can sleep well tonight is not what Earl Wyman has to consider. All his thoughts are on his grandson, but he can't go up to such a big fire. He must guard this door for his grandson. Whether the family can fly into the sky depends on tonight. But there was something else, besides this plume of smoke over White Harbor tonight. The main building of the Manderly family in White Harbor, Poseidon Tower, caught fire at night. The cause is unknown. However, the Manderly family seems to have predicted the fire in advance. The specific reason is under investigation. The ink was dried, the letter was folded and stuffed into the raven's mailbox. Fly, bird, and carry this news south. Someone laugh. Born in fire, and let the fire burn for one night, everyone, tomorrow is the moment of birth. Chapter 95. The Name of the Dragon, Galisos. The fire burned all night long until daybreak. When Earl Wyman opened the door extremely nervously and panting, he was immediately taken back 2 steps by the thick smoke. His eyes were all black and gray, his nose was full of ashes, and his originally nervous heart was now even more elevated. However, when he saw clearly the gray-black human body lying on the ground among the ashes of the fire, and the blue-gold creature entrenched on the human body's chest, his steps suddenly froze in midair. Awakened by the light and sound, the newborn blue-gold creature opened its golden eyes and looked at the stranger who entered the room. The next moment, feeling the danger, it opened its light blue wings with golden stripes. It made its first roar when it came into this world. Dragon! This is the dragon. Although the life in front of me is young, it is like a creature created by the gods. It is the dragon that has disappeared from Westeros for hundreds of years. Although the voice of the young dragon was very small, Count Wyman subconsciously retracted his steps. At the same time, an unspeakable surprise exploded in the old man's chest. His grandson, he succeeded. The blue-gold dragon struggled to open its wings, its small mouth opened, and its tiny teeth stood upright. It is very aware of the size gap between itself and the person in front of it, but in order to protect its owner, it works hard to intimidate. Earl Wyman felt that something was a bit tricky. Let alone him, no one in the world has any experience in communicating with dragons. Faced with a young dragon that looked like a protector, the old man didn't know what to do for a long time. At this moment, he heard his grandson coughing violently. Cough, cough, cough. Clay was stunned not by the fire, but by the thick smoke. He really didn't expect that even if all 4 windows on the top of the circular tower were opened, the smoke concentration in the room would still be shockingly high. Originally, he lost too much blood, coupled with the crazy output of magic power, even with the strong cardiopulmonary function of the demon hunter, he finally fainted. Until this morning, when the smoke density dropped, he was recovering. Although he still didn't wake up, that was because his body needed to recover. The sound of the old man's footsteps and the roar of the young dragon woke him up from his deep sleep. He felt that his nasal cavity was almost filled with dust, and he began to cough violently. The young dragon coiled on Clay's chest suddenly felt the master beneath him shaking violently. The dragon's head immediately turned around, staring at Clay with a pair of confused eyes. After coughing for a while, his breathing became clearer. Clay wiped the ashes from his face and finally opened his eyes. Then he was stunned. A pair of big eyes were looking at each other with a pair of small golden eyes. He seemed to be able to vaguely feel the other person's thoughts. Are you awake? After staring for half a minute, Clay's down brain finally came back online. He sat up in surprise, picked up the baby dragon from his body, and held it in his palms. This is my dragon. Clay looked at the little dragon in front of him carefully, not missing any detail. What a perfect creation! The fine blue scales covered the dragon's body, and the golden patterns connected every bone protrusion. The slender neck was like it is a flexible snake. Clay. Earl Wyman gave a gentle reminder to express his presence. The moment he saw the dragon, all his heart was in his stomach. At the same time, the hot feeling in his heart could no longer be suppressed. This was a dragon. Regardless of its actual significance on the battlefield, in politics, the Targaryen family represented by the dragon has only been destroyed for more than 10 years, and the dragon is the true king. This has been the unspoken rule of Westeros for the past 300 years. Hearing Earl Wyman's voice, the little dragon instantly jumped from Clay's palm, fluttered its wings and jumped onto his shoulder. The dragon's tail wrapped around Clay's neck, and its small mouth roared a warning towards the old man. Clay was a little strange. He seemed to be able to feel the dragon's thoughts slightly. He raised his hand, tried to touch the dragon's back gently, and explained in a low voice, "It's okay, he is my grandfather, and he is with us." This was what Clay said to his dragon, and the old man twitched his lips. Miraculously, Xaolon seemed to be able to understand Clay's words. He made a purring sound in his throat, lay on Clay's shoulder, and curled up into a small ball. Clay comforted it and finally turned his attention to his old man. The grandfather and grandson looked at each other for a long time. Finally, they both smiled at the same time. Then, the smile began to widen and eventually turned into a loud laugh. Dragon. No amount of words can describe the mood of the two of them at this time. The Manderly family, together with the Targaryen family in history, will become the Dragon King family closest to the gods. When the dragon flaps its wings, the Lannister will be waiting to be turned into very cooked meat and presented to the seven gods as tribute. Grandpa, has father already gone to war? The bald-headed Clay is currently staying in the old man's study. No one knows he is here. After stopping the old man's attempts to give Xaolon a taste of Kingting Island's fine wine, Clay rubbed his forehead with a headache and asked the question he was most concerned about at the moment. What made Clay most speechless was that Xaolon sniffed and looked back at him. In that look, Clay felt that it was a feeling of resentment after he had prevented it from doing something good. For some reason, Clay had a picture in his mind. One day in the future, he would go to see the dragon he raised. Instead of bringing a lot of meat, he would bring several barrels of fine wine. The dragon's mouth bit the edge of the barrel, stretched its neck, and the barrel of wine disappeared. Then, the big blue-gold guy glanced at himself with satisfaction. The meaning was obvious. "Master, you understand me?" Quickly shaking this horrific scene out of his head, Clay heard the old man's answer. "Yes, they set sail last evening. If the wind is favorable, they should be nearby tonight. They will take advantage of the darkness and launch a sudden attack. If done well, the battle will be over in a few hours." Hearing these words, Clay felt slightly relieved. The White Harbor fleet was overwhelmingly powerful against the Three Sisters Islands. With 20 warships and enough soldiers to launch a night attack, there was no possibility of losing. Oh. Xaolon was like a curious baby. At this time, he no longer bared his teeth at the old man. He was jumping around on the table, looking at everything that was new to him. Knowing very well that dragons eat cooked meat, Clay cut a piece of steak directly from the old man. The little guy who was just a day old had already eaten it and his eyes were filled with tears. Frowning and staring at the energetic little dragon, Count Wyman asked his grandson, "Boy, have you decided what to name it?" The old man had some doubts about his grandson's ability to name him. If he couldn't hear a domineering name similar to Balerion, he was ready to grab the naming rights himself. But Clay has already thought about this issue. Its name is Galisos. By the way, this name is named after the famous ancient Valyrian god. It is in the same category as Balerion, Meraxes and Vhagar. The name Gaelethox represents god of fire, stars, moon, sun and dawn, at least, is more literate than the name Daenerys gave Crossout and sounds much better, right Akimbo? Chapter 96. The fleet returns and the pirates are defeated. Clay has been in Poseidon Tower for 6 days. There is no way, Galisos relies on him very much. Although the old man with the same blood as him, Galisos, is no longer disgusted at all, it still occasionally shows anxiety and uneasiness when Clay is not around it. Newborn baby dragons seem to have a strong appetite from the moment they are born. This magical creature made of blood and fire has an astonishing appetite and an equally astonishing growth rate. In Clay's memory, the dragon can grow to 6 meters in 1 year, which means that after 1 year, Clay can ride it and soar into the sky. He can't leave the Poseidon Tower yet. Although the old man has gone in and cleaned up in advance, and then asked people to tidy up the top of the tower, no one seems to know that Clay is the protagonist of the fire drama that night. But the problem was that his hair was burned away in the fire. His body could withstand the heat of the flames, but his relatively fragile hair could not survive. Now when you go out and stare at a bald man under the spotlight, it's hard not to be reminded of what happened that night. Although no one could have guessed that Clay had hatched the first dragon in what is now Westeros, other rumors and speculations were detrimental to Clay. Clay planned to wait until he had to go to the Three Sisters Islands before leaving the old man's study in Poseidon Tower. I originally thought this would be a long process, but things went smoothly beyond Clay's expectation. Standing on the corridor outside the door, Clay stared at the red comet in the sky. This red comet was originally brought by Daenerys, but now Clay has indeed taken the lead. The dragon returns, the city's glass wax burns again, and the sluggish magic power begins to rise again. Clay knew the meaning behind this. I don't know exactly when Daenerys hatched her 3 dragons. 1 against 3, if they are of similar size, Clay feels a little hung up. However, Clay has his own ideas. In Clay's magical vision, the entire Galisos is a burning flame, and he controls the magic output, using fire magic like Igni to gently touch the body of Galisos. Clay could feel that the magic growth in the dragon's body was accelerating little by little. He didn't know how fast the dragon was growing, but 6 days had passed. Galisos' body had gone from being skinny at the beginning to being slender now. When it was around Clay's neck, it was already obviously thicker. The weight has increased by at least 10%, and I have a very intuitive experience of tossing it around like a cat every day, lifting the high Clay back and forth. Clay doesn't know High Valyrian, but he still remembers the domineering Dracarys. Steak, but a piece of raw meat that was brought over. Galisos leaned over and smelled it, then snored in disgust. In Clay's heart, he vaguely understood Galisos' thoughts. To sum it up, it's probably a complaint. Is this something a dragon can eat? There was no other way. After Clay gestured for a long time, and said dragon flame for a long time, Galisos finally understood what his master meant. So, Clay truly witnessed the dragon flames for the first time on the balcony. Obviously, although the Galisos dragon was very small, the temperature of the dragon flame was already quite high, and the bloodshot beef turned brown visibly to the naked eye. Under Galisos' cooking skills that did not satisfy Clay and himself, a piece of charred steak was finally cooked by it. However, this appearance is not so good-looking. However, Galisos still swallowed his own work very neatly. Its small abdomen seemed to be a bottomless pit, and it ate as much as it was given. It was rare that it couldn't eat anymore. On the other hand, this can be considered a good thing. With the help of Clay's magic and ingredients, I wonder if Galisos can grow faster. Suddenly, the bells in the port rang. Clay moved his eyes away from the direction of the red comet, and looked at the place where the sound rang. When he wasn't paying attention, a large sail shadow seemed to appear out of thin air on the sea. The trident mermaid flag on the huge sail was very eye-catching. The fleet is back. 2 days ago, Clay and the old man had received the Raven letter from Wendell in the Lord's Tower of Sisters Village. The White Harbor fleet has completely destroyed all the maritime power of the Three Sisters Islands, including all pirate ships without family logos. Tristan Sunderland, the ruler of the Three Sisters Islands, has become a prisoner of the White Harbor fleet, and the army began to eliminate the pirates hiding on the island. Since Earl Women issued an order to completely bulldoze the city, Wendell did not hold back at all. The White Harbor army was not polite at all to these pirates who had been plundering for many years. Men, as long as they are identified as pirates, will be hanged or killed with a sword. Women and children, if they dare to draw a knife from the White Harbor soldiers, will be killed without fail. Don't think this is cruel and bloody. Historically, far more Northerners died at their hands than now. Moreover, they are not worthy of sympathy. There is a saying that is very good: only greater violence can curb violence. If the Holy Mother really speaks, Clay can only reduce more by letting the dragon grow as soon as possible and conquering the 7 kingdoms as soon as possible. Of bleeding. The longer the war drags on, the more people will die. But now, Clay doesn't have any psychological burden to kill some pirates who are already stained with blood debts. Under the throne there are always corpses everywhere and rivers of blood, no matter where they are. Now that the victorious White Harbor fleet has returned to White Harbor, there is only one result. The cleanup has been initially completed. The remaining population will be moved away by ships from the Manderly family and replaced by troops and people loyal to the family. Now that troops have been sent, the Manderly family must swallow this place, otherwise there will be no value in fighting this battle. Clay knew that it was time for him to leave Poseidon Tower. After soothing Galisos, Clay put it into a large box, used an ecstasy sign on it to calm it down, carried it on his back, and kissed it in front of his most loyal demon hunter. Surrounded by guards, he quietly left the tower with a hat. Before boarding the ship, Clay found out what was going on in the Three Sisters. There were nearly 10,000 islanders in total, and 300 of them were killed in the first battle. Afterwards, the army killed several hundred more people during the sweep. The remaining 8,000 people have all been gathered together and are waiting to be transported. In this batch, Wendell squeezed out 4 boats and brought 800 people to White Harbor. After the old man received these people, the men would be sent to the mines, and the women and children would be dispersed. dispersed to the villages that had been designated long ago. If this were a game, White Harbor would be where it is now, with reduced stability but increased existing population and births. Not knowing that his son had already boarded the warship returning to the Three Sisters Islands again, the straight-hearted Wendell happily went to report his merits to his father, completely unaware of the old man's eyes as he looked at the departing sail. Worry. As a longtime fan of Game of Thrones or The Witcher, of course he understands who should be killed and who should not be killed. From the perspective of the protagonist, of course he cannot promote this plan to attack the Three Sisters Islands, but this means that he has to choose between military glory and dragons. I never want my characters to be pacifists. If it is a harmonious society, of course I would not object to it, but the problem is that this is a world of ice and fire where people are murderous and wild, and human life is really as cheap as a piece of grass. Chapter 97 Dragon Cave on Changi Island. Dragons are free creatures and should not be trapped on the ground by chains and stones. The fleets responsible for transporting people in White Harbor are all incestors, waiting to transport these losers who have laid down their weapons to their strange new home, if they do not resist. Clay, on the other hand, boarded a warship controlled by Earl Wyman's most trusted captain. After leaving the port, he went straight to Sister Island, which had been almost cleared. After 2 days of sailing with favorable winds, Clay brought his dragon Galisos to this land where the smell of blood and burnt smell had not completely dissipated. The ship would be waiting for Clay here, although the captain had no idea how long he would be waiting. Leaving his personal guards to wait on the shore, Clay carried the heavy wooden box that occupied most of his body and walked step by step deeper into the island. Although he could interfere with the thoughts of these personal guards, he still didn't want them to know the existence of Galisos. He could hide it for as long as he could, giving the dragon as much time as possible to grow. After everyone could no longer see him, Clay put the wooden box on the ground, opened the wooden board, and Galisos, who had been suppressed for a long time, neighed, flapped his blue-gold wings, and flew into the sky with him. Galisos, go and find a place where you feel comfortable. The young dragon, which had grown larger than an average puppy, seemed to understand what his master meant. He flapped his wings and quickly disappeared into the distance. The dragon shuttled back and forth on the island, returning to its owner for a while, and then quickly disappeared from the end of sight. Avoiding the deserted villages and towns, Clay and Galisos spent nearly a day, one person and one dragon, relying on the dragon's instinct to finally find a cave on the hill in the north of the island. By the time Clay came over, the original owner of the cave, a thick-bodied snake, had already had his head scorched by Galisos' scalding dragon flames. At least, his dragon won't be hungry tonight, Clay thought. The snake has a powerful body. Judging from its appearance, it should be a python. It is estimated that one roll of its body can strangle a calf. But facing the overlord of the sky, it was blocked in the cave, and Galisos broke into the door. A mouthful of dragon flames immediately blurred its face. The snake faces the dragon and turns into a roasted meat, which is its only ending. Ignoring Galisos, who was burning the snake's scales with dragon flames and stretching his neck to enjoy the delicious food, Clay carefully looked at the nest that Galisos had chosen for himself. It should be a naturally formed grotto. The entrance is not big. Clay himself is tall, so it would be difficult to get in. However, this is not a problem for Galisos, whose overall body is streamlined. On the way here, Clay had told his dragon bit by bit that as the master, he was about to leave it for a while, and as compensation, he left a free world as a gift for Galisos to gallop around. There are no chains or wooden boxes. It can go wherever it wants, whether it's fishing in the sea or roasting animals on the island with dragon flames. The first dragons grew up in such an environment, so their wingspan could cover the sky above the town. The dragons raised in the dragon cave of Junlin were bound by iron chains and stones, and eventually became like dogs. Size. Clay didn't know if Daenerys could communicate with Drogon like this. In his memory, she didn't seem to have such an ability. Otherwise, when will Galisos be able to carry himself across the strait to find Daenerys? Thinking about that scene, he thought he was the heir to the last dragon bloodline in the world, but suddenly a dragon master came to him. Clay really wanted to see the expression on the little queen's face at that time. Clay was so excited by his brainstorming that he decided to include this idea in his future plans. Such extremely demanding things must be done by himself, and everyone else should get out of the way. It has been explained a long time ago that although the guards were worried about their master, they did not try to enter the depths of Changi Island to find Clay. They know very well what kind of power their master has, especially now that Changi Island has been plowed by the army, and it is the safest time in decades. In front of Galisos's dragon lair, Clay made a simple grill, cut off a section of the trophies Galisos had caught during the day, skinned them skillfully, and then put them on sticks. This roasted snake meat has no taste, but it is enough to fill your stomach. Coiled in the haystack in front of Clay, Galisos has gradually revealed its sharp teeth and is concentrating on dealing with the snake body, as thick as his body. Except for the spine and scales, all the parts went into the dragon's mouth, which seemed to never be full. When you encounter a part that you can't bite, spray a few more puffs of dragon flame to solve the problem. Clay will order this eldest sister island to be blocked by the White Harbor fleet for a year. During the war, trade will be cut off, so no merchant ships will come here. In 1 year, Galisos, who was given a wide space, has grown up. Although it is impossible to grow too big, as long as he can get on the dragon's back, it won't be a big problem. There is a dragon, but the difference in effect between having a dragon and being able to control a dragon is actually very large. If Clay gained prestige in the war going south, beat the Lannister until he cried for his father, and then generously distributed the loot to the bitter soldiers. With huge popularity and military power, once Clay reveals that he can control dragons, the nobles of the Seven Kingdoms will probably put the old Targaryen story behind them. Countless aristocrats who were of the same age, or even had a huge age gap, as long as they were women, would find ways to send themselves to Clay's bed. Not because of how handsome Clay is. On the contrary, even though Credsai is extremely ugly, the dragon equals the crown, and this is deeply rooted in the hearts of the people throughout Westeros. The nobles can use the Mad King's atrocities to overthrow him, but no one can deny the legitimacy of the Targaryen dynasty for more than 200 years. If not, why do so many people bow their heads when they see Daenerys? Do they really think they are all animals dominated by their lower bodies? And if there was a brand new Dragon King family without the heavy historical baggage of the Targaryen family, what do you think these nobles would think? If you can integrate your family's bloodline into the new Dragon King family, wouldn't your family status in the future rise? Speaking of Daenerys, Clay, who is stirring up the bonfire, has been a little unsure about how to get along with this domineering little queen. The two will definitely meet in the future. It doesn't mean that as soon as the Crays pass and marry Daenerys, everything will be over. How can it be that simple? She wanted to take revenge and restore her Targaryen dynasty. As a serious northern noble, she was on their revenge list. Even if Daenerys gives up her hatred, then what? Is she a queen or not? If she is united with her, will this new dynasty be called Manderly or Targaryen? If Clay can control the dragon, he will inevitably become a potential competitor for Daenerys' throne. This is not a question of whether he is willing or not. Unless we establish a good relationship with the little queen before her power takes shape and figure out the future, otherwise, there will be big trouble in the future. That's right. I've made it clear, this is the first female protagonist. It must be true. Clay and Daenerys can't have another dance of blood dragons, right? As for whether there will be a second one, how about some readers recommend it to me? Chapter 98. The Commander-in-Chief of the army raises the flag and marches westward. Clay stayed on the island for 2 days. After seeing Galisos adapting very well, he finally felt relieved and returned to the port alone. Seeing that their young master finally appeared, the guards who had been holding back from going to the island to look for someone finally let go of their worries. They all noticed that when the young master came back, the big wooden box on his back was gone, but no one asked about the young master. They would not ask about the young master unless he took the initiative to bring it up. They know what they should know and don't ask about what they shouldn't know. This is the quality that a personal guard should have. After the matter here was settled, Clay stepped onto the warship and directly ordered to return. Although there was a headwind, Clay returned to White Harbor on the evening of the second day after setting sail, together with the second batch of the White Harbor fleet carrying the Aborigines of the Three Sisters Islands. He didn't notify anyone when he came back this time, and there was no need for any welcoming ceremony to show his status at this time. After getting off the boat, Clay, escorted by his personal guards, rode straight to the old man's room. When he arrived at the study, he happened to meet his father Wendell, who was 1 step ahead of him. "Seven gods, Clay, are you looking for someone to cut your hair? You can't imitate me and Willis. We both have no hair. If you have hair, don't mess with it." The father saw the biggest change in his son at a glance. His hair, which was originally neatly combed, was now visible on his scalp, which was infinitely closer to the hairstyle he and his eldest brother Willis had. Wendell has always been proud that his son finally got rid of the trouble of hair loss and has a head of high-quality hair that even women would envy. Unexpectedly, seeing his son's current state, Wendell felt that he was heartbroken. Clay touched the top of his head. Once he entered the Poseidon Tower, he forgot about it and subconsciously took off his hat. I had some problems with my scalp before. I need to clean it up after the haircut. Clay explained dryly, how can I say this? There is no such thing as performance art in Westeros. The baldness of the Manderly family is extremely distressing to the male family members. Seeing that his father's brows were about to condense into a bow, Clay quickly changed the topic, and then quietly put the hat on his head again. Out of sight, out of mind, hope it helps. Father, do you have any suggestions about the army? After all, this is my first time leading an army on the battlefield. Although he was full of infinite longing and expectations for the battlefield, he was a little uneasy when Clay actually led 1,000 or 2,000 soldiers onto the battlefield. Rarely, a serious expression appeared on Wendell's face, which had always been kind. He looked into his son's eyes and his tone was more serious than ever. Clay, I can't go against your grandfather's will, but let me tell you, actually leading troops to the battlefield is not like going on an outing. Although I know you have seen blood, that is not the case on the battlefield at all. Every decision you make, it's best to discuss it with Sir Malone. It's not that I don't trust you. Only people who have seen it can understand some experiences. Also, this is a disgraceful suggestion. When charging, don't charge at the front. Honor is one thing, but life is another. Remember, no matter what, don't let yourself get too far away from our army in White Harbor. This is very important. Finally, be kind to your soldiers. They will fight for you at critical moments. Patting his son on the shoulder, Wendell's words were serious and thoughtful. He wanted to say something else but couldn't think of anything. He still had a mission and needed to rush to the military camp immediately. The old man gave him a death order and he must hand over the best army to Clay. After carefully savoring his father's words, Clay opened the door. He had to report back to the old man and he had to listen to the old man for the next arrangement. Sure enough, as expected, his old man was drinking again. This time it seemed to be a new variety. Clay looked at the bottle and didn't recognize it at a glance. When he saw his grandson coming back, the old man raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, "You're back, your Galisos, is he settled in?" Clay nodded, pulled up a chair and sat in front of the old man in a familiar manner, then picked up an inverted wine glass from the plate and stretched it directly in front of the old man. Earl Wyman was stunned and didn't understand what his grandson meant, but when he followed Clay's gaze and saw the wine bottle in his hand, he still didn't understand what his grandson meant. "You kid," after cursing, the old man poured a full glass for Clay. Clay brought the wine glass to his nose and saw that the dark brown wine exuded an inexplicable aroma, as if some kind of spice had been added. I took a sip directly, and sure enough, the sourness of the wine was completely covered by this mysterious spice flavor. Frankly speaking, this was a new experience on board that Clay had never experienced before. "I just found the dream wine of Karth from the wine cellar. I don't know when I got it, but it does taste very good." The old man shook his head and pointed at the wine glass in Clay's hand. However, he was still more concerned about the dragon than the luxurious wine, so he repeated what he just said. "Don't worry about Galisos. Dragons are much more powerful than any other creature. Only by flying freely can dragons grow faster." This was Clay's answer. He could feel the slightly joyful mood of Galisos flying in the sky. Nodding, Clay is the master of the dragon. The old man didn't ask any more questions. Until now, in his dreams, he had been imagining the extremely glorious future of his family. However, back to reality, he is still Earl Wyman who rules White Harbor. "Clay, prepare yourself. Report to the military camp in 3 days. I have prepared 500 armored cavalry, 600 heavy infantry, and 200 long archers for you, a total of 300 people." The old man paused for a moment and his tone became unnaturally dignified. "Take them with you. Hoist the flag of our Manderly family, and go all the way west to join the army led by Robb Stark at the King's Road." Clay knew that the number of this army exceeded the army sent by the Manderly family in another timeline, both in terms of numbers and equipment. With this army in hand, Clay's voice in the Northern Army will also be enhanced. After all, it is still the same sentence. These soldiers, like him, are Manderly first and then the Northern Army. 3 days later, Clay got up early, and after eating a sumptuous breakfast very seriously, in the hall of the Mermaid Palace, His sister Wilfield personally put on the most exquisitely made personal armor for him. Plain white hands fastened the azure cloak on Clay's shoulder armor, and Wilfield stopped her movements. "Be safe, we are waiting for you to come back." Whispering in a tone that only the two of them could hear, Wilfield looked at Clay, and slowly backed away. The younger sister, Vera, held the long sword that Clay was accustomed to, and presented the sword to her brother. Taking the sword means going to war. Under the watchful eyes of the old man, his uncle Willis and his father Wendell, Clay took his sword. The angry waves of the sea. Earl Wyman's voice resounded through the Mermaid Palace again, and then, all the Manderly family members present shouted out this family motto that has been passed down for thousands of years at the highest volume. Striding away, Clay stepped onto a dark horse under the watchful eyes of his bodyguards, the White Harbor Army, and waved the flag of the Manderly family violently. The rumble of horse hooves sounded, the mermaid flags were raised, and the army marched westward. Let me give you a preview. The whole chapter will be 4K plus tomorrow. I always feel that I can't write a chapter of 2,000 words, and my emotions are so incoherent. Halfway through, I said, "Oh, the 2,000 words are coming soon. Come on, hurry up and shorten the length. Complete a small plot." Tomorrow the 2 chapters will be combined into one. I wrote 2 chapters myself, and I feel like I have more to say, which is great. I will probably continue this pattern in the future. See you tomorrow, gentlemen. Chapter 99 Northern Army. 24 days after Lord Eddard Stark faced off against the false king in King's Landing, honor did not triumph over the sword. Robert Stark, the young master of the North, summoned his vassals at Winterfell, commanded about 16,000 northern troops, left Winterfell, and quickly headed south along the King's Road. One of them is to find his father, Lord Eddard, who was lost near Harrenhal. More importantly, this army will fight for the honor of Eddard Stark. The North will never surrender to the throne of the false king. Kill the false king and send out the army. Now, this army is stationed north of the Neck, waiting for the Stark family's extremely important vassal, the young heir of the Manderly family, Clay Manderly, and the 2,300 northern soldiers under his command. Moat Cailin, camp of the Northern Legion. The young army commander, Robb Stark, was leaning on the table with both hands at this time. The table in front of him was filled with scattered maps. He was surrounded by the seals of his father, Eddard Stark, minister. Joffrey didn't chop off Eddard's head, so they were Eddard's vassals, not Robb's. He originally held the discussion in the hall of Carlin Bay, but the young commander believed that he should stay with the army. This was an offer that these old nobles could not refuse, so the meeting was changed to it was carried out in the camp in the center of the legion. In a dark stove, the burning wood made a harsh explosion. Although it was very warm, it was far from the passion of the adults in the tent. That old guy Wyman actually let a kid lead the army this time. Are you confused? The loud-voiced, grumbling patriarch of the Umber family, John Umber, known as Great John. This tall man, nearly 7 feet tall, was standing in front of a table covered with maps, shouting loudly, without realizing that the commander of the army in front of him was also a child. Mrs. Caitlin, who was standing next to Robb, heard these uncomfortable words and stabbed her directly. "My lord, I think I need to remind you that there is probably someone younger than the child you call me in this tent." After being stunned for a moment, John Amber, who had been subdued by Robb and his direwolf Grey Wind, realized his gaffe, smiled, and quickly gave Robb an apologetic look. Unexpectedly, Robb didn't even raise his head, as if he didn't hear what he just said. Clay and the others should be arriving soon. The leading scouts arrived yesterday. Robb raised his head and said to his mother that he was looking forward to meeting his good friend. In his mind, both of them are young leaders, so they naturally have similar feelings. Catelyn was also deeply impressed by the young man who became famous with one sword in Winterfell. She nodded and said, "When he comes, you should go and greet him. I remember that we have a good relationship." At this time, John Amber reacted. He touched his head and asked, "Is that the boy who killed the Lannister in front of King Robert?" Robb glanced at him and showed a faint smile. There is no more suitable young commander in the Manderly family than him. As the protagonist of their conversation, Clay was currently riding a horse, walking at the front of the team, talking to Sir Malone who was riding side by side. Among the surrounding Witcher guards, 4 were protecting the 2 in the middle, and the remaining 1 was guarding back and forth, even though Clay was much stronger than them. Because there are a large number of infantry, the speed of the Manderly family army cannot be too fast, not to mention whether the quality of this army can support a forced march. Even if they were able to forcefully march to Carlin Bay, they would have to rush south again without much rest. Clay was the commander-in-chief and would not do such a stupid thing. Recalling all the details that he could remember in a normal war, Clay was now concerned about one issue. Sir Malone, where do we rank among the 2,000 people in the Northern Army? Clay put away the map in his hand and asked a question to the old knight beside him. The old knight touched his chin, looked back at the steel jungle behind him, thought for a moment, and gave an answer. Not counting Stark, he is definitely in the top 5. This answer does not satisfy Clay, because in this kind of joint venture army, whoever has more troops actually equals a larger share in the company. The right to speak is sometimes very important. Why was Roose Bolton the leader of the Eastern Route Army after the twins divided their forces? The Bolton family sent more than 3,000 troops in this war, making it the largest army under the Stark family. Without Stark, the commander of the Eastern Route Army could only be Bolton, and this was not what Clay wanted to see. Roose Bolton is a good person at planning bloody weddings, plotting and backstabbing, but his fighting skills are indeed a bit trendy. Clay doesn't want to hand over his soldiers to such a person to lead him. This is simply giving away. If there is a chance, Clay will find a way to seize control of an army. To put it another way, the army in his hand cannot be lost. Then do you think that if the troops are divided, can we in Manderly serve as the commander-in-chief of one side? Clay asked his second question. Stunned by this question, Sir Malone didn't follow Clay's idea at all. Split the troops? Why divide the troops? Where to divide the troops? The old Jazz, whose mind was full of question marks, forced himself to consider this question. He didn't let Clay wait too long and gave his own answer. If the troops are divided into 2 groups, I can clearly say that we can't fight. One will definitely be Stark, and the other will be either Bolton, Karstark, or Amber. If we talk about military strength alone, except for Bolton, we have some advantages over the rest. But the problem is, Clay, you have never been on the battlefield. It is impossible to hand over this second army to you, Lord of the North. They won't agree. The old knight's answer did not surprise Clay. However, to change his thinking, if dividing the troops into 2 groups is not possible, what about dividing the troops into 3 groups? The twins divided their forces so that Robb could command his cavalry to surprise Jaime Lannister, while the remaining infantry went to meet Tywin, who was heading north. But now, the situation of this war is different. The last news of Eddard Stark was near Harrenhal. According to the intelligence, it is now an area controlled by Lannister. Perhaps, a high-mobility cavalry with a small number of people but a strong offensive ability will be needed to bypass Tywin's army and go straight to Harrenhal. After clearing the Lannister skirmishers, they will wait for an opportunity to pick up Ed Smith, Duke Tucker. With the Lannister blocking the King's Road, Eddard Stark could only remain anonymous and his men were reduced to pieces. Otherwise, the remnants of the Northern Army in his hands would not be able to stop Tywin's army no matter what. If he falls into Tywin's hands, then the North will have lost half of this war, because Robb Stark will throw the rat away. After all, he has not yet won the Battle of the Whispering Forest and has not captured James Tom Lannister. Without equal amounts of chips, the game would be unplayable. 3 days later, the dusty Clay could already see the Northern Legion camp that occupied the entire hillside. The so-called 10,000 people are boundless. Clay had already felt that the more than 2,000 people in his hands had given him enough visual impact. But when he really saw this magnificent army garrison, he could only lament how insignificant an individual's power was in the face of war. He saw a group of cavalry holding the gray-white direwolf flag and the red-back steel-framed iron fist flag, heading towards his army. They are from the Glover family, Sir Malone reminded him with a smile. Clay nodded. As a young man with a good aristocratic education, he certainly knew the flag of the Glover family. He wanted to know who Robb sent to greet him. It seemed that the member of the Stark family who followed him south was just his mother Catelyn. Could it be that Bran Stark is coming too? It shouldn't be. But soon his doubts were answered, because he recognized the leader of the cavalry, a tall young man wearing a gray and black cloak. Sir, Robb Stark has come to greet us in person. Clay was a little surprised, but he still reminded Sir Malone. Next to Robb was a middle-aged man with a gray beard. Clay didn't recognize him, but it was obvious that this man must be a member of the Glover family. The cavalry approached quickly and Clay also rode out of the crowd. The young masters from the north have come to greet him, so naturally he cannot stay in the army. From a distance, Clay raised his arms and said hello to Robb. 10 seconds later, under the control of his superb equestrian skills, Robb's horse stopped steadily in front of Clay. The two young heirs clasped their arms together and laughed. Clay looked at Robb, who had not changed at all, and joked. "Sure, Master Robb. It didn't take long before you became the master of an army of nearly 20,000 people." After hearing this, Robb smiled and gave Clay a slap on the shoulder. Then, he stepped aside slightly and pointed at the middle-aged man who was half a horse behind him and introduced. "Galbert Glover, Lord of Deepwood Motte. Is this the owner of the Glover family of Deepwood Castle?" Clay looked at the strong man in front of him, smiled and stretched out his hand. "My lord, Clay Manderly, I would like to send my regards to you on behalf of my grandfather." Galbert Glover, who has been observing Robb and Clay, is now certain that the Manderly heir in front of him probably has a very good relationship with Robb Stark, and Lady Catelyn also knows it very well. At that time, it was Lady Catelyn's idea to ask Robb to meet Clay. Robb and Clay are similar in age, which attracts Earl Glover's attention even more. "In this war, I am afraid that Clay will gain Robb's trust." Stretching out his hand and shaking it with Clay's hand, Earl Glover smiled and exchanged greetings with Clay, then said nothing more. After all, the owner here was still Stark. Seeing that the two of them knew each other, Robert ordered to Earl Glover, "Your Majesty, please find a dry and flat place for the Manderly family's army. I will take Clay to see my mother first. After you have made the arrangements, come to the big tent. Everyone is almost here. It's time to discuss what to do next." "As you command, my lord." Earl Glover agreed. Clay originally thought of calling Sir Malone to arrange the garrison. Unexpectedly, Sir Malone rode out on his own. Earl Glover seemed to know Sir Malone, and he laughed and replicated the actions of Clay and Robb just now. "Let's go to the big tent and I will introduce you to my father's vassals." Robert took Clay away, but Clay noticed that when Robert mentioned these vassals, his tone was not as relaxed as before. "What, adults, can you handle it?" Clay probably guessed the situation Robb encountered, so he asked. Robb didn't hide his thoughts at all before his good brother. He said with some distress, "They are all people who followed my father and won the usurper's war. Although this time I summoned them to go south to rescue my father, none of them said anything. However, I can see that in their hearts they still only want to. I'm a kid. Honestly, you and I are just children in their eyes." Clay shrugged, his tone rather helpless. Clay finally understood what happened to Robert. It was a typical situation where the master and the young minister were strong. If Robert hadn't established his reputation as a Stark on the battlefield, these old guys might have done something wrong long ago. Daeron Targaryen was only 14 years old when he conquered Dorne. Robb expressed his dissatisfaction with the old guys talking about age. "Forget it. The young Dragon King did conquer Dorne at the age of 14, but so what? 10,000 people died for the Iron Throne for this battlefield, and finally, in order to maintain its rule there, more than 50,000 people were damaged." Clay understood Robb's mood, but the example he gave was really inappropriate. In the end, the young Dragon King Daeron Targaryen himself died in the war he started with his own hands. "Robert, war is not just about blood and fire. Sometimes, women and garlands can. It plays a much greater role than the former." After humming twice, Robb couldn't find a reason to refute Clay's words. Along the way, Robb muttered and shared with Clay what happened in Winterfell. The two of them brought their own personal guards, and the flag behind them also turned into a direwolf and a mermaid holding a trident. In the chaos, Clay followed Robb and stepped into the military camp composed of more than 10,000 northern soldiers. Along the way, there were soldiers with weapons and equipment everywhere. Clay saw the family emblems of various northern families. The closer to the center of the camp, the more soldiers from the Stark family. The two of them dismounted their horses at the gate of the camp. Clay's personal guards were taken to rest by Stark's soldiers. Here, they were not qualified to enter. "Let's go, let you see how many unpleasant things a child will hear in this camp." Robb raised the curtain of the big tent and walked in with Clay. As soon as they entered, there were many people standing or sitting inside, and their eyes were all attracted to Robb and Clay. Looking around, sure enough, all the people here were as old as his father. He saw Lady Catelyn, who was sitting in the back, nodding and smiling at him. Clay had left a very good impression on Catelyn during his stay at Winterfell. The northern nobles present all understood Clay's identity. Clay, who had just found an empty chair and sat down, saw a rugged man who was taller than him and yelled at him. "Boy Manderly, How many troops did you bring in response to the call this time? The voice is very loud. The tone is very impolite. Clay frowned. He didn't know who this person was. Caitlin introduced him aloud. He is Jon Umber, the last Lord of Hearth. Nodding to Caitlin to show that he understood, Clay returned his attention to Jon Amber, his tone not polite at all. Lord Amber, in what capacity do you ask me this question? The tent became quiet, and everyone was quietly listening to the conversation between the two. Jon Amber didn't understand what Clay meant and frowned with some white eyebrows and shouted, "Boy, what do you mean? If you ask this question as the master of the Amber family, then, as the heir of White Harbor, I don't have to answer your question. If you ask me as the vassal of the Stark family, then the same vassal, I don't need to answer you." Clay stared coldly at Jon Amber's angry face and continued, "If you are asking this question as a military commander who is more experienced than me, then I can tell you, but be careful, my lord. A teenager can let a wolf bite off 2 of your fingers, then you can also use swords to make you lose 2 more. With a clang, Jon Amber kicked the chair away and reached for the giant sword at his waist with his big hand. Sitting next to him, a thin, middle-aged man with pale skin pulled Jon Umber's arm to prevent him from drawing his sword. "What do you want to do, Lord Umber?" Robb shouted, and Jon Umber angrily let go of the hilt of his sword, picked up the chair and sat in with a bang. A pair of bull's eyes stared at Clay angrily, as if they wanted to eat him. "My lord, I haven't asked you your name yet." Clay smiled at the man who just stopped Jon Amber and asked. But when he heard the answer, the smile on his face became very unnatural for a moment, because the name was Roose Bolton. It is indeed a new experience to write such a large chapter for the first time, but from my own feeling, I can really describe more things, and I have more opportunities to lay out some things I like. By the way, didn't the heroine reveal her identity before? Some people have their own ideas. Let me tell you my understanding. In the entire Game of Thrones, the Dragon Queen is definitely the most distinctive female character. She is not a vase, she is a queen. Not the queen. Of course, I can let the protagonist go to Essos before and kill the Horse King directly, but the question is this Daenerys still her? Maybe this becomes a vase with this name. It has never seen blood and fire, and has never experienced pain or loss. It is estimated that it will be like Michela, just a flower in the greenhouse. This is no longer interesting. I don't know if I can write emotional scenes. I'll try it in the future. If it doesn't work, I won't write it. It would definitely be inappropriate to cut off such an important character like Daenerys. I think it's less important whether the protagonist has true feelings for her or not. Regardless of whether he has true feelings for her, her claim to the throne is real. The protagonist married 3 idiots. Assuming that all the male Starks are useless, it is equivalent to gaining a claim to the north. The same is true for Daenerys. As for what happens next, it depends on my pen. Chapter 100: The first military meeting before heading south. If Roose Bolton hadn't revealed his family name, Clay would never have connected the man in front of him with the traitor who planned the bloody wedding and almost completely destroyed the Stark family. From the first impression, Roose Bolton is a very gentle person, and even has a little bit of elegance in his movements. When he was talking to Clay just now, his tone was calm, and he seemed to be deliberately controlling his volume so that you wouldn't feel harsh. If Clay didn't know such a person very well, he would never think that he was a ruthless, calculating and cruel person. Clay used his peripheral vision to observe the reactions of the nobles in the big tent. Roose Bolton's action of grabbing Jon Amber seemed to have received the approval of many people. Clay even noticed that Catherine and Robb gave Roose Bolton a kind smile because of this. Clay somewhat understood why the command of the infantry regiment fell so easily to Roose Bolton later. Catherine, Robb, and even the entire northern nobles completely believed in this guy who took pleasure in skinning people. I was extremely vigilant. This was not a good sign. Facing Roose Bolton's smile, Clay could only continue to smile. After all, the other party had just resolved a conflict for him. He looked at the northern nobles present and reported the number of troops he had brought. "My lords, our Manderly family has brought a total of 2,300 people this time, including 500 armored cavalry, 1,600 heavy infantry, and 200 long archers. Thank you to the Manderly family for supporting me, the Stark family. I would like to thank the Manderly family on behalf of my husband." Lady Catelyn spoke a ceremonial word of thanks to Clay on behalf of her husband and son. When the Lord calls, no matter what the situation, the vassal must come. If he disobeys, it is tantamount to rebellion, and the end is usually the destruction of his family. The best thing is to be like Marquis Walderfrey, who will drag it to the end, and then his reputation will be completely ruined. Hey, your grandfather has made a lot of preparations this time. Earl Glover, who had arranged the Manderly family's army, opened the door and walked in. He cared very much about Sir Malone, and naturally he also cared about Clay. Your Majesty, Earl. Clay nodded to Earl Glover. Seeing that the matter was basically over, Robb Stark lightly knocked on the table, focusing everyone's attention on himself, then coughed and said in a deep voice, "My lords, before I was in Winterfell, I received some news intermittently. Now, I will tell you about the situation we are going to face." Robb dug out a huge map of the Riverlands from the pile of maps, then took out the thin wooden stick at hand and pointed to the location between Golden Teeth and Riverrun. About 3 weeks ago, here, in the hilly areas of the Golden Tooth and Riverrun, my uncle Edmure Tully assigned his men, Lord Vance and Lord Piper, to fight the Kingslayer's troops here. A battle, but unfortunately they were defeated. Robb pushed a lion's head carved from wood to that position, attracting the attention of everyone in the tent. What did Edmure Tully think about attacking the Lannister in this kind of terrain? John Amber, who had just been choked by Clay, seemed to have completely forgotten what had just happened, and his thick voice began to work at full power again. He frowned and pointed at the fighting location. "No, as far as I know, my uncle's army was completely in a defensive position, but the regicide came down from the mountain and they were completely unable to withstand it." Robb shook his head with a solemn expression. The Riverland suddenly encountered the enemy and failed in the first battle, leaving no time to assemble the troops. Clay was a little strange. Why did the Kingslayer still appear on this battlefield? Shouldn't he be in King's Landing? Why didn't the White Sea Guards in King's Landing come to Raven to tell him such important news? Clay didn't know what the capital of the Seven Kingdoms was like now, but a faint worry still lingered in his heart. Regardless of any ridiculous timeline closure, the Kingslayer Jaime Lannister's ability to arrive in the West so quickly proves that Lord Tywin has been preparing for war since Eddard Stark's accident in King's Landing. The defense was defeated. Are you all frightened by Lord Tywin? John Umber muttered that the Northerners had always despised the combat effectiveness of the Southern army, and he was very disdainful of Edmure Tully, who was in a defensive position and was defeated in a single battle. Robb said nothing and continued to share news from the battlefield. Lord Tywin's other army has already left the west along the Golden Road. This army is moving very fast. As of the news I know so far, they have been stationed at Harrenhal and the forward has approached Haraway, Earlstown. A larger lion's head was pinned to the north of God's Eye Lake. What are you doing in that big ruin, old lion? Hunting for treasure? Lord Glover asked strangely. If you look at the map, this Lannister army actually made a circle far away from the battlefield, carrying the most powerful force, but not attacking the Riverlands in one fell swoop. What on earth is Lord Tywin planning? Clay's eyes were fixed on the location of the lion's head. Although this location was strange, it was indeed the main traffic artery between the north and the south. He raised his first question in the combat meeting so far. My lords, we have to figure out now, who is Lord Tywin going for? Clay moved his body closer to the table and pointed his finger at the location of Harrenhal. Master Clay, what do you think? Roose Bolton still had that faint smile on his face. Clay ignored him and continued. If it's coming towards us, then the circle is too big. The upper reaches of the Green Fork River are so strong that only the twin rivers can pass it, but that's not the case downstream. If he is trying to block us, by the time he is done with Harrenhal, we will have crossed the river from the lower reaches and directly joined the battlefield in the Riverlands. Unless Lord Tywin doesn't rest at all now and goes directly north along the King's Road. So I judge that the old Lion's purpose is probably not us, but to lead the army to find Lord Eddard near Harrenhal. After saying this judgment, everyone's hearts were immediately lifted. The last news about Eddard Stark was in the Harrenhal area. Assuming that he wanted to return north, the fastest way would be to go north along the relatively good King's Road. But the problem is that once the Lannister army enters Earl Haraway's town, it will completely block the possibility of Eddard Stark returning north quickly. Again, Ed Stark must not fall into Tywin's hands, otherwise, there will be no need to fight the battle in the north. Clay took a wolf head representing Stark and placed it near Harrenhal, and he pushed the lion head upwards to the town of Earl Haraway where the forward was located. At this moment, everyone's expressions turned ugly. No matter how much they disagreed with Clay's youth, everyone had to admit that this inference made some sense. This is forcing us to make a choice. The whole army is going south along the King's Road and fighting to the death in the Riverlands with Lord Tywin, who has been waiting for us for a long time. Otherwise, we can go directly across the Twins and deal with the war in the Riverlands that is about to burn down to Riverrun, and then have a decisive battle with Lord Tywin. Although Roose Bolton's voice was small and difficult to listen to, he summarized the current situation well. Sometimes, Clay feels that Ed Stark might as well be imprisoned in King's Landing. At least, the Northern Army has the initiative on the battlefield. In the current situation, Eddard Stark is in enemy-occupied territory, and the Northern Army must go to rescue him. This means that whether or not the Lannister army in the west is defeated, the main army led by Tywin, the north, must be touched. It's not accurate to say that it's touched or it's far from it. From the perspective of the Stark family, this is a battle that must be won. Only by smashing Tywin can the Stark family take back Eddardsmith. The possibility of Tucker. I must rescue my father as soon as possible. This is why I raised the army. Robb shouted excitedly that when it came to his father, he was still a teenager after all. No one dared to object to this statement, but the adults in the north frowned. Obviously, neither of these two paths was a perfect choice. Clay looked at Robb. The young wolf lord in front of him did not propose the plan of cavalry crossing the Twins and infantry going south to stop Tywin as he remembered. The difference lies in the change in Ed Stark's own situation. In that timeline, Robb knew that his father had been captured anyway, so in this case, catching the Kingslayer was a very good plan. But the problem is, now that Eddard Stark could be caught at any time, the situation is completely different. The life of his father cannot make a teenage child calm down and think about the problem. As a woman, the same goes for his wife Catelyn Tully. The nobles in the north argued with each other for a long time, but in the face of the complicated situation in front of them, no one could come up with a suitable strategy. According to the intelligence, Marquis Walder Frey of Twin River City has summoned his army and sealed off the east bank of Twin River City. This Twin River City is not just a matter of passing. When the last northern noble left the tent, the fruitless debate finally ended for the time being. There were 3 people left in the big tent: Clay, Robb, and Catelyn. Clay suddenly realized that there was one person missing from this meeting, and he hurriedly asked Robb, "Where is Theon Greyjoy and why haven't I seen him?" Robb, who was thinking hard, heard Clay's question and couldn't help but think of the scene before he obtained Grey Wind, and asked Clay with a strange expression, "Why do you think of him? I sent him to the Iron Islands this morning and asked his father to send troops to the west." Upon hearing these words, Clay immediately became anxious. He stood up in front of the shocked eyes of Robert and his son, and without caring about the courtesy of the lord and vassals, he directly asked, "Where is the person? Is he gone?" Robb and Catelyn were baffled by Clay's sudden change. The former frowned, feeling that Clay was still thinking about what happened in Winterfell. "I haven't left yet. I'm packing my things and will leave early tomorrow morning." Hearing this, Clay felt relieved. Fortunately, he didn't let this disaster go away. He said directly to Robb, "Robb, recall him quickly. We must not let him go to the Iron Islands." "Why?" Mother and son both said at the same time. Robb didn't understand what Clay meant by that, but Catelyn felt that Clay was too lenient. After all, Theon Greyjoy was her husband's adopted son. "No matter how you say this is all Stark's business, what does it have to do with you, Manderly?" Clay ignored Catelyn at all and spoke quickly. "Robb, let me ask you, is Theon surname Greyjoy?" "Yes, Clay, don't do it because of your last name." "He is Balon Greyjoy's only son, right?" "Yes, but..." "King Balon's rebellion was put down by your father and King Robert, right?" Robb finally fell silent. He seemed to know what Clay was going to say. "So, why do you think that if you write a letter, Balon Greyjoy will listen to you and bring his Iron Fleet to attack the West? Tywin doesn't have any big hatred against him. Furthermore, you have personally eliminated his biggest concern about taking action in the North. Let me ask you, if he detains Theon and asks him to become a Greyjoy again, then Balon Greyjoy led the Ironborn to attack the west coast of the North." Clay's tone was frighteningly cold. "When the time comes, why do you stop him? You and most of your vassal troops are here. If the North falls while we are fighting Tywin, you will be damned if your military morale does not collapse!" Exclamation. Catelyn sat in the chair, too lost to say a word. In this plan, she strongly agreed with Shin's actions and did not consider this at all. Now being reminded by Clay, she finally remembered that most of the people with the surname Greyjoy were a group of virtuous people. No way, Kshin and I are brothers. Robb couldn't accept that Kshin would betray him. But Clay's next words unceremoniously exposed his fantasy. Robb, wake up. Balon Greyjoy is Theon's father. Remember, his surname is Greyjoy, not Stark. Clay didn't have time to sympathize with how miserable Theon's experience was later, and how much he was struggling in his heart or whatever. The second fifth boy was the second fifth boy. If he really went to the Iron Islands, then the North would be really hard to save. Robb, send others to hold King Balon's son in your hands. Only then can we ensure that the Iron Islands help us fight the Lannister. Although the word pinch sounded extremely harsh in Robb's ears, at this time, he also understood that what Clay said was right. Fortunately, Clay had a good relationship with Robb in Winterfell, otherwise he wouldn't be able to finish what he said today. Robb opened the tent and hurried to find Theon, leaving only Clay and Catelyn. Naturally, Clay couldn't stay any longer, so he caressed his chest and left. As soon as he turned around, he heard Catelyn's voice. Thank you, Clay. Without you here, this might have put us all in danger. I know you and Robert are good friends and he listens to you, just like Ned and Robert. Same, this is very good, but I beg you, treat Robert as your lord, don't treat him as a child, even though you were not much older than him. Of course Clay understood the kindness and reminder in Catelyn's words, which was exactly what he wanted. He turned around, saluted the northern matron again, and spoke his answer calmly. For the sake of the North. The curtain was lifted again, but this time, Catelyn was the only one left in the tent. I posted typos first and corrected them later. There is a big chapter. Let's try to make it coherent. Here, I have changed the order and circumstances of the original story. I believe readers can understand it. I personally understand that the reason why the North had successive victories on the battlefield and suddenly collapsed in the end was not only because Robb broke the engagement, but also one reason comes from Theon's assassination. The Ironborn directly captured Moat Cailin. What a concept. There was no way home. What about the wife and children at home? If you want to say that Roose Bolton was planning to kill Robb from the beginning, I don't really believe it. I think things are accumulated bit by bit. Let Theon go to the Iron Islands to call for reinforcements. To give an inappropriate example, A and B were fighting. Both of them were holding a knife. Then A won and said to B, give me the knife, and B gave it to me. A humiliated B. 1 day later, A and C were fighting. Both sides faced each other with knives and had no time to defend themselves. At this time, B came over. A looked at it and said, come on, I will give you the knife back. B, go give C a knife. The logic board understands that's it. Who do you think B will stab? Really? A good hand is played to pieces, and that's Robb.
Thank you so much for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the story, so please leave a comment below. And if you want more fanfiction audio, be sure to like and subscribe. See you in the next one.